psyop really, truly is the left-right psyop, because at its base, what it does is every single administration gets to set a slightly broader mandate for the next administration. And because it's always flipping from left to right, you get caught up. If you're on the left, you're over here. If you're on the right, you're over here. And every time you get in power, yay, see, this is it. And finally, things are working out and great. And then the other person goes in power and it's like, oh my God, they have too much power. And it's a ratchet because it keeps going up and up and up, but it'll never slip back down. It just keeps ratcheting up and up and up and up to the point where essentially, suddenly we have this executive order dictator who can do apparently anything. I mean, we'll see, I guess. We'll see if there is any actual judicial kickback against the types of things that are going on. Doesn't look like it so far. And the thing that blows my mind is exactly like with the Musk thing. If you put it in the context of, hey, he's hipster Gates, he's hipster Soros, maybe people can start to see, oh yes, if those people were doing this thing, it would be bad, but Musk is doing it, so I support it. It might, for the few people who actually have principles that they go on, that might get them thinking along those lines. In the same way, you know, everything that Trump is doing right now is going to be used by the next D to get into power. And you think that's, you know, if you're on the right side and, oh, I'm a Republican, yay, you are going to, in 4, 8, 12 years, whenever it is, whenever it eventually inevitably happens, oh my God, how can this Democrat wield so much power? Oh no.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up, a concise show dedicated to bringing you the most relevant independent news as we see it from the last 24 hours. Saturday, March 8th, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. Definitely feel this is an important show. You guys have gotten used to the way I formulate my titles, sometimes a little bit predictive, kind of like what I'm sensing in the conversation, whether it's like a huge focus or not, and, always somewhat of a focus or a point that we make. But in the past, I've done a lot of these where it's kind of like the impending, the impending regime change in Bolivia, for example, like 6 months before that actually happened in the last Trump administration with Pompeo giving him the dead stare. I thought that was very obvious and was just my opinion, right? But I'm starting with this because I think it's important. One, just to right out of the gate, demonstrate our value at the Last American Vagabond for those out there that are new to this platform, whether it's myself and my show, Derek's writings, Whitney's writings, Robert's writings, Matt Arrett, and which has obviously been pulled back on a little bit lately because we're dealing with other financial burdens that are coming from, censorship and suppression and lawsuits and whatever else, all unjustified, in my opinion. Nonetheless, the point is that's still coming and will be growing back to where we were, no matter what. That's my desire. I'm willing that into reality. But my point is that all of our work, we've done a lot of this where we have these, educated guesses. Here are the facts we've seen. Here's what has been building. Here is what has, what they've said before. Here's what they've done in the last 6 months. And here's why we think that lines up to this being what comes next. Not that we know for sure, not that we're not considering other possibilities, but just an outline. And then my point is for you guys know this, that's why you're here. For those that are new, take a second and look back through our work. Take the Last American Vagabond website and go through and look back to the last decade. And you tell me how many times we've made statements like this that don't turn out to be what happens. And I'm not saying I'm always right. Hardly. I make mistakes. I think things might happen that don't, like anybody else. But when we do things like this, it's because I think the writing is on the wall. Now, I could still be wrong, always. But what I'm saying is you look what we go through today and just the focal point of artificial intelligence being used as government, which is really not even that contentious of a topic. I mean, I'm going to show you things from The Conversation, like some pretty mainstreamy type platforms out there that are talking about a really obvious on the top of the conversation concern. Is that coming? Right? Like, discussing whether it should be done this way or that way, which is a point they'll make today, as opposed to whether it should happen at all. I'm of the mind that it's already happening. Now, this again, even that's not that contentious. There's people who have made valid arguments. And if you just look at what's been going on and who's driving the bus in, the many buses, it's obvious that that is a very plausible and logical thing that might be happening. And then we'll go through the actual evidence that I think suggests that it is happening. And other than their statements literally telling you that AI is going to be used to make our government more efficient. But I really want you to think about just outside of the conversation today and take a look at how many times that we put these things together for you and how little that has effect on our reach and growth in this field. Now, not because that's what we care about. Hardly. If I cared about being popular and getting the money and getting lots of shares, I'd be screaming about QAnon and left-right paradigm stuff, and we would be booming. It's not what I care about. I'm in this because of the truth, even to my detriment. And that's why I love supporting, on that note that pops into my head, groups like Odyssey and BitChute that absolutely stand for your rights to their detriment. Like we bring up with BitChute every time in the comments section. You guys, they allow that section to be even what bots will dump in there because it is what free speech is, including people that manipulate that free speech. And they do that because that's how you err on the side of your principles. That's very important to think about. Anyway, the point is, go back and look at that stuff. Many different times we've called these things out a lot during COVID-19. My point of all that to say is today, I think it's important, it behooves us all to consider apolitically, aside from left or right, which anybody who really watches this show understands that's how everything we're discussing comes from. And that's not to say that I don't have different opinions. I'll just to pluck them out of the ether. I think people like Maxine Waters or Nancy Pelosi are the worst thing or like even a Biden, for example, just not only just because they're senile and ridiculous and that I don't think they're actually making the shots, calling the shots or making decisions. The same thing, I feel the same way right now about an Elon Musk. I feel the same way about somebody like a McConnell. My point is there's different levels of how much I dislike people depending on, but it's not unique to partisanship is the point I'm making. And I want people to really think about it in an apolitical sense, whether that is what's going on. And even if you think, or even let's just add to it, that they may think that's for your best interest. I really don't think that. At best, I argue they think it's for their best interest, and that might align with your interests. I know I'm a pessimist when it comes to government, but we have every reason to be. But my point is that even considering that, with what we go through today, the different foreign influence, and I'm not even talking about the obvious, shockingly large red flag of how many people in this cabinet are completely tied and blindly supportive of Israel no matter what they do and are Zionists themselves. I'm talking about the actual technical side, the technology, whether China or Israel, who have invasive aspects of what we're doing right now, rather what they're doing, and what that means for you. And let's just even say it all goes the way we all want it to. Like James was just talking about, what does that mean for the future? What happens if we set up this dystopian AI control structure and they run it the right way and then the next person turns it against you? This is why we need to have these conversations before they just rush into why we needed to fight China and we all yell our partisan things, and then the next thing we wake up and somebody else is in control. That's by design, guys. That is how this is supposed to work. That's why I love James' work so much, is he's been doing this for so very long, making the same consistent points based on his principles and nonpartisan perspectives and objectivity. But generally, the point is about AI governance today. Some side points we'll make that connect to this point. Things like the interesting kind of, I'm not going to get into what you might think about the Ian Carroll thing, specifically the point about the phone that they're discussing, which I think ties back to important writings that Whitney's done for TLAV that are really important to the bigger conversation of Israeli cybersecurity, infiltration. And now when you have a team screaming about MAGA phones and red pill phones, and when you can literally prove that it's made in Israel, that is made by Unit 8200 people that are literally involved in the process, that have NSO group connections back to the origin, who are the very people who are being accused and now found guilty of spying on Americans. That sounds, it's insane how obvious that is. And my point is that we need to see how that all comes together with what's being rolled out, and the politics tends to blind it all. But some of those different points we're going to get into as it relates, as I just showed, to the larger conversation. So we'll leave it there to start, get into a bunch of different things today. Shout out to, well, Censorship shared this, but in the actual clip, this is What's the Truth podcast right here. I'll include the actual link. I'll add it for you. And we've been on their show a couple times, I believe, or once or twice. Good conversation. But, just James laying it down long term. Now, I want to include this to start because this was just something that I wanted to make sure you saw. I actually shared this as well on, I think I've got it right here. I shared this out on, actually, I should have grabbed Allison's version of it. I forgot to do that. I shared this from Allison. Allison had us on Allison Morrow. Here we go. To discuss RFK Jr. I'll put this in. It'll be at the bottom since I'm adding it late. Add this to the bottom here. So you guys can, it's important to share the original. This is where we did this. I asked her if I could reshare it on Substack because I thought it was an important conversation. So Allison invited myself and Bernadette Pager on. You might be familiar with her. She's associated with Children's Health Defense, and now she's done her own podcast. And I have great respect for her. I think she does great work. Now, we have a difference of opinion about whether or not RFK Jr. is, I guess the crux of the point. And interestingly enough, it's kind of similar to Derek and Ian back and forth about this, where the basic point revolved around whether you acknowledge what we see as a deviation from what was promised and just say, I find that right now dishonest, or that we believe that it's in the pursuit of something larger, which obviously they could be right. That's ultimately the argument. Her and I agree on most everything in the conversation, other than a few different points around different nuance points you can check out for yourself. But we both agree the risks of the injections. We agree on the COVID-19 timeframe. But what's interesting is that she's of the mind that RFK Jr. is kind of playing the game to potentially change things for the better in the long run, which, my God, we should all actually want if that's what's happening. I just don't think that's what's happening. And I'd like to believe, I pray every day that these people are right, but I think the evidence clearly ends up showing us that that's not what's happening, and historically so as well. That's my opinion, though. I recommend you watch this. It's called RFK Jr., Hero or Hypocrite, where, I lay out the evidence of why I think, and I make it clear in the beginning, whether or not that's what he's doing, I still find it hypocrisy. So it's more so of a conversation than a debate, because my starting point is basically it's hypocrisy, even if everything you're saying is correct, which is that he's been fighting the MMR shot his entire career, or rather, vaxxed a little before forward, and has made it a principal point about the dangers of autism, about the bad ingredients. On and on. From saying in front of Congress that he would give it to his kids and previously saying that he wouldn't, that kind of a thing. There's a huge deviation here. My mindset my gut tells me if I had to pick, that it's more so somehow manipulation, that doesn't, in my opinion, is no pass. Even if he's being threatened, it's not, we don't know that is the point. You don't ever blindly assume into what just makes it all make sense. You consider that. My point is it's still hypocrisy for him to even, and we went through it all, the ridiculous nature of the whole way, the way people are framing that article about how we didn't read it. We went through it line by line, guys. And it's very clear that most of the people claiming that actually probably didn't even read it. I'm not going to assume that, but if you read the actual article, it's clear that he is leaning into the MMR shot more than anything else. And then we go over the vitamin A point, which I even had a follow-up point on and showed the actual Wayback Machine, which highlighted that the vitamin A point was there well before they made this supposed shift. And all they really shifted was that now you require doctor supervision. Now, maybe there's more to it, but that to me sounds more restrictive. You can go back to 2024 and before, and they very clearly are saying vitamin A for measles. Now, did they push that? Did they put it in Fox News articles? No. So that's still a positive. And we go over all that in the show. But I think it's important to err on the side of principles and outcome. But very important. Now, on that note, on top of that, I'm going to go into something in the next shows and will be going public or personally to one of these upcoming protests, joining Bernadette in regard to something really crazy. I was going to go into today, but I'm going to put it off until the next show. It's very alarming, and it's in Tennessee. It has to do with a bill that is basically doing exactly what they did in the Act of 1986 in Tennessee, which is essentially, I shouldn't say exactly, but very similar to basically making it that if EPA is okay or, approves a pesticide, that therefore you can no longer hold those pesticide companies liable in civil court if that's somehow inaccurate. And it's absolutely ridiculous. It's the same thing they did before. Well, they won't make them if we don't do that. Well, good. We don't want any of it then. Stop them. If they can't make something safe and effective, then stop letting them make them. That sounds pretty simple to me. Oh my God, we'll all die. No, pretty sure we'll be okay. My point, though, is that that's an important conversation, and I'm going to be joining them in person to try to do some on-the-ground work and maybe interview them while they're doing that. And that's the kind of important stuff they're working on. Just want to highlight that because that's crazy, and I think that's going to broaden out across this country, especially with the kind of pro-business, no regulation mindset of the current administration under some kind of flimsy guise of freedom, which, if you to my mind, the same as before, is if you're going to remove regulations from powerful companies and not remove all of the government protection and you're basically just allowing them to do what they want to us. And, my point is, let's get rid of all government regulation, not just those that apply to businesses that make money, and I mean government, if you really want to understand my opinion about that, but get into other shows if you don't know what I mean by that. But the point here, guys, is it's a great conversation. Thank you, Allison, for having us on. And I think it's an important one to have right now. We both agree with that, about the holding their feet to the fire more than ever, even if you believe in these people. Let's also not forget, by the way, he came out with another attack on free speech, which is about fighting anti-Semitism, which we'll go into more today, which I'll remember this when we go back to it, because he came out starting essentially a memorandum, like I forget the term he used, but it wasn't just him saying this on Twitter. He rolled out an HHS joint task force to ultimately fight anti-Semitism from the HHS. It doesn't make any sense other than exactly what you know is happening right now based on all the stuff we've been showing you. That's what I believe is very clear. I mean, that's unconstitutional. I'll get there in a minute. It's unconstitutional, guys. Whatever you think about this, even if it was literal Hamas supporters marching through the street, what they're doing is shockingly unconstitutional. And anybody with integrity is calling this out right now. But we'll come back to that. Start people rattled off, get all the anger trolls in the chat, get all frustrated to start. Now, but here's something I wanted to go to off the RFK point. Now, this is just a start. Again, that was opening things I want you to see. To start the show in earnest, I want to give you some opening points here that I think demonstrate that and I could go make a whole show like this, and I kind of have already, of different points showing you that we aren't going in the direction that they promised. Do the same thing for Biden or Trump before that or Obama or any of the rest of them, because they all do the same thing. Promise, but then excuse. And here's a couple of breadcrumbs every time. And then as Corbett points out, they build and they build and they build, and everybody keeps cheering back in the hamster wheel. My point is, a lot of the stuff that's happened isn't happening. Dr. Simon Godek says still no COVID accountability. I mean, do we really think that's going to happen? I certainly hope so, but I find it hard to believe. Well, you've got people who were chiefly involved with that same illusion packed into the administration, and Trump still tells you it's a good thing, and he was responsible for Operation Warp Speed, and RFK just said the childhood schedule and Warp Speed itself were good things in front of Congress. Come on, guys. I mean, of course, all of that could be a big smokescreen to roll out the big change. If that happens, I will be right there with you screaming how great it is. Until we have any indication other than hope and, whatever excuse makes it all make sense, then that's ridiculous to pretend is happening. Give me some evidence and I'll talk about it. But no COVID accountability. In fact, we're still using mRNA platforms. We're still rolling forward an mRNA bird flu shot through Moderna, which is being funded currently through the Trump administration. No one in the MAGA world wants to talk about that. Fauci, Wen, and Barrick still not arrested. Yeah, what about that? What about Klaus Schwab? What about Bill Gates? What about all the, whether you think they should be or not, the point is what was claimed and all the hype about all the military tribunals and everything that would change. Epstein files still hidden. No surprise there. Is this what it looks like winning or to win? He asks. And this is what this person says. Did you really expect that everything would magically change in less than 2 months? And this is how he kicks down the road, right? Give him some time. So again, this is basically trust the plan, man. They told you what would happen. Just sit back and let it continue to happen. Well, if it's not even beginning to happen, then we can't say let it continue. So it's hope. I've decided to believe that they said they were going to do something, and they will, even though they've already walked back on 16 things they said they would do. But we'll just give them time. I think that's just insane to me. And it says, I totally think that everything that is happening is what winning looks like. Right. So, funding the mRNA platform, funding the Israeli war that was supposed to be ended on day one, funding the Ukraine war was supposed to be ended on day one. Now, yes, everyone's debated. Alex Jones said it was already over. Well, it's not, and I don't believe it will be, but we'll have to wait for that moment to actually come. I mean, guys, who knows what's going to happen with Ukraine? We're not going to get into it today. There's reasons I could see why it would make sense that they would collectively want that to kind of go away if Russia's in the same page. But I can also see a shocking amount of reasons why Israel and the U.S. would absolutely not want that to go away. So it's up in the air. Either way makes sense to me. For them to claim they know this or that, which they always tend to do in the partisan mania when it rarely happens, is just embarrassing. And people keep following them for some reason. My point is that I don't believe it. If I had to call it, I would argue that they're going to find a reason to make it continue. Or shift the narrative and claim it's over like Trump did in Syria, even though we're still there to this very day. Think about how dumb that stuff is. Remember how they were screaming last time that Trump ended the Syrian war? He defeated ISIS, even though we're still talking about ISIS and serious. I mean, it's just ridiculous, guys. Narrative is all they care about. The point here is that will continue most likely because they have agreements about resource mining and all sorts of infrastructure rebuilding, and as well as Israel having designs on the location, just like they did with Syria. Look at what they're doing there. It's not secret. But as anybody honest would do, let's wait and see what actually happens, not just narrative. But to him, it's winning. Right? It's winning to have meetings with Bill Gates. It's winning to have a packed Palantir administration, all lobbyists and war hawks and everybody else. But all that was what was promised, right? Winning. That's what he voted for, he says. Now, I bet you if you had him write down what he voted for, it wouldn't look like anything that's happening, but he'd go wink, wink. That's what it really is behind the scenes. But it says the deep state wasn't built in a day. It's not going, I mean, again, what do you mean by that? What is the deep state? Is a building down the road? Are we talking about an infrastructure here? Are we talking about an ambiguous, unelected power structure that is not one thing? I think these people literally think they're fighting the Democrats as some kind of DNC building. I have faith and confidence there will be an account, and there it is. That's the only point that matters. I believe he told me the right things. Whatever happens, I'm claiming it's winning because they keep telling me this is what it looks like. That's my opinion. Obviously, maybe I'm wrong. But here's what Simon says. Winning requires constant pressure. So look, even if you think they're actually doing what they said, he's still right. Feet to the fire, especially for those that you believe in. The deep state won't disappear on its own. What's concerning is that the entire administration is APAC funded, which this guy likely won't care about. I doubt anything will change on that front at all. Of course. Oh, he does say down here, and I think he responded. He says, I agree with you, but I choose to stay optimistic and I do whatever I can to help the fight. Okay, well, I agree with that. Now, to me, what that shows is somebody who understands what he said is logical and is just going to respond, well, I get it. I'm going to choose to believe. Okay, fine, good. See, I can respect that. If you want to end it, well, I'm just hoping for it. Okay, great. I think that's lofty and not fact-based, but that's up for you to decide. Michael Tracy points out that there's still censorship on Twitter. Now, this isn't even about censorship on Twitter. The first point is obviously just showing you that there's no accountability for those things. This is not just censorship. This is government compliance. This is Twitter continuing to comply with government censorship demands all around the world, multiple countries, and including the United States, because the Garb lawsuit made that clear. Over about 90%, I think it was either 80, what was the exact, give me the exact number if you remember off the top of your head. Was it 89 or was it 90 something % of the time they've complied with GARM requirements before that whole thing pretended to go away and it really actually didn't? Or the government demand. Oh no, it was about the government demands that was the 89 number, and then it was GARM had largely complied with their demands. Point either way is they've complied with censorship demands in this country and all around the world. Here he's showing you Sputnik and RT. Why? Because Michael Tracy went to Europe, tried to look at them on his phone, and Twitter said you can't. And it says account withheld. See, you don't get to see this stuff when you're in this country screaming about free speech saviors when they're literally censoring. Oh, but those are bad propaganda platforms. Okay, then you agree with censorship. It's the same thing we're going to get into in a minute, talking about the protests. Well, you're okay with violence? Well, no, there are crimes against violence. The point is about government suppression of speech. If there's a violent crime, then arrest somebody. But the idea is they're trying to create laws that stop you from speaking about certain things and calling that violence. This is government suppression through Twitter of their adversaries. The same thing they scream about all around the world as bad guys. But don't, look the other way, ladies and gentlemen, because we're not supposed to care about this. Sam Husseini, another point that hasn't changed. Here's Sam Husseini in the new State Department in front of a new administration. He says, so Trump admin State Department had their first briefing today. This was on the third. And he says, I was not called on despite having my hand raised for virtually every question. Now, not never have to be calling out everybody, right? But let's be clear. Sam Husseini is a grizzled, long-term, well-respected person in this room, along with Matt Lee and Saeed Erekat and people that have been there for a very long time. So the point is that if he's there raising his hand the entire time, well, maybe once, twice, but continuously, like we saw with Matt Miller, which I'm probably going to tell you is going to happen. We'll have to wait and see. It shows you that they're choosing not to call on certain people. Yeah, they get you in the room, but then they just don't let you talk. And so it's an illusion while they're they're funneling through their fake mainstream alternative media special chair to the right to make it seem like something's changing. But it says they set up a series of structures seemingly attempting to impose control. This included assigned seats to people. I'm flashpoints. So assigned seating where they kick him back to the corner and don't call on him. In other news, Thomas Massey calls to end the Fed. Right? Isn't that what MAGA's going to do? Haven't we all been told that Trump and Elon are going to end the Fed? No, you misunderstood. They're going to audit the Fed. See, that's how they play the game. Even though that's ridiculous and never going to amount to anything that's of actual change, which Ron Paul would tell you, which Edward Griffin down here will tell you. And this is something Decentralized News has played. G. Edward Griffin has talked about this, and this is The Creature from Jekyll Island. A second look at the Federal Reserve is the name of the book he wrote. He says, has long argued that an audit is not necessary and can even be counterproductive. And the bottom line is, guys, you're talking about a broken system, people that are corrupt who have created the broken system, and you're asking them to audit their fraud. Now, the game is, well, it's only the one side. So we're the good guys auditing the fraud. Well, the problem is it's not going to change. It's going to be cemented so they can use the problem like James Corbett's talking about. Now, Mike, that's not an opinion. That's what has continued to happen as far back as you want to look. Now, I certainly hope it changes this time. There's no indication that it will. They have no incentive to change other than you believing that they will without checking. To me, that's not incentive. That's a blank check to do what they want and scream what they want you to think is happening. My point is that this is what real change would look like. Now, how much you want to bet this gets ignored if ever even voted on? And if it does, it probably won't pass. And they'll probably find a way to blame it on one side of the paradigm. Either way, it's the same point. Your government will not allow this to change. I hope it changes, though. Maybe I'm wrong. Federal Reserve Board Abolition Act, H.R. 1846. My point is the same as before with Ron Paul, where they tried to get him, like, Ron Paul is going to help us do that. And Ron Paul's, hey, let's end the Fed. And then, of course, you get the dishonest people. I think it was one of those Republican senators that just always circle around Elon and Trump and basically said, get Ron Paul to audit the Fed. And everyone's like, yeah, audit the Fed. I mean, it's like, you guys don't even understand the audience that you're trying to court. It's embarrassing. The End the Fed group is like, what are you talking about, man? But they are trying to manipulate the larger masses. Nope, my point is illusion of change continues. Here's another example. U.S. halts aid to South Africa immediately as Trump offers fast-track citizenship. Two obviously insulting points. So we're going to keep funding an ongoing genocide with the most documented amount of international war crimes that I don't think anyone has ever seen, ever. I mean, documented, whether there's been some that have been more in earnest, which I don't even find possible, but documented. And yet you immediately pull funding from South Africa, which there's plenty of things to criticize going on there. But think about the inconsistency of logic there. And then, for a second point of inconsistency, offers these people to come settle in the United States. Now, of course, where is the question, seeing as how either they're going to give them government land, which would be essentially an American choice, but, or they're going to find somebody else's land, which would be pretty on brand for these current administrations, or Greenland or whatever else they do. But the point is about inconsistency, as always. And also what's funny is this is being reported now like it's breaking news. Here's Benny Johnson breaking. March 7th, President Trump invites South African farmers with families to the United States with rapid pathways to U.S. citizenship. Wow, that's some breaking news, Benny Johnson. Well, here's, weirdly enough, the psychic report from The Last American Vagabond from February 9th. Geez, that's a long time ago. And I said, look at this. Trump to resettle Afrikaners and Afrikaners in U.S. I wasn't guessing. It was a U.S. government document, and it's clearly real, and it's clearly happening. So ask yourself why it was only breaking news when the MAGA people told you to start talking about it. Because it was inconsistent. It was embarrassing because they were too close to the immigration conversation. Think about how silly it is. Now, I said, are we, as we reported on February 9th, by the way, which of course gets very little reach because that's how this platform works, even though we've got a lot of following on here, it says, what was that about stopping immigration again? Yeah, nothing. Now, what's funny about that is this person made my point for me and says, white immigrants have never been the issue. Say the quiet part out loud, I see. Stop being disingenuous. No, I'm not. You just misunderstood what I was trying to get accomplished. See, the self-serving assumption is like this. It's like branded in the brains of partisanship at this point. And it says, these are our brothers and sisters. I guess because they're white? You mean these South Africans who came from Denmark who have literally nothing in common with you? You are literally just because they're white does not mean it's going to be any more, the assimilation is going to be any more difficult. There are people in brown skin, black skin locations in the world that are more close when it comes to our ideology that would assimilate better. But you see, that's not what they would think because it has nothing to do with assimilation. It has nothing to do with anything other than they're the same color as us for some people. Now, I can't speak for politicians and everybody in the Trump administration, but you begin to see that this is where the point comes from Israel, especially as the Ethiopian Jews are treated as second-class citizens. Orthodox Jews who call out Zionism are treated like terrorists. It's about Zionism. And it's a racist ideology. That is not even up for debate. I mean, this is an important thing to talk about in another conversation, but I'll quickly play this.
Zionism is racism. Israel cannot be both. Israel is either a racist Jewish state or it's a democratic state for everybody. And that's what...
Avi Shlaim, he's a very prominent Israeli historian. And he's sitting there with Human Rights Watch, and he goes on to explain why the nation state law that states very unequivocally that it's a state for the Jews alone, I know, hard to wrap your mind around why that's racist, right? Is racist. And that Zionism is the worst kind, or apartheid and Zionism is the worst kind of racism there is. So my point is this is what's bleeding over into this country. And he says white immigrants have never been the issue. Now, the real point is not about whether it's white or black or brown. It's about immigration, and it's about the resources, if you're going to be accurate and logical about it, and assimilation. Assimilation. Those things clearly matter. They're not racist points to bring up, right? But there's humanitarian aspects to consider. And that's not for every American to have to shoulder. The point is, I said, thank you for so perfectly making my point. He says, I agree, we need to close the border, which I didn't say I wanted that. And, the amount of blind assumption in the partisan field kills me. And it says, but again, the third world invasion wasn't white people, dude. Well, dude, the third world invasion is being driven by foreign governments, and Israel has been screaming why that needs to happen. And I can prove to you that they've been involved in many different ways. Not that every aspect of it is, but we've gone over this in the shows. So if we're going to call that out, let's recognize who's actually driving that bus. But secondarily, it's not about the only mindset that it's about a third world invasion are the people that make this about race. There are obvious other aspects to this, foreign policy, just decimation of other people's cultures and then criticizing them when they flood away from your bombings. The bottom line, though, is if we're going to make it consistent and say that it's not about the color of the person coming through, it's about what that does to the system, which is what you're going to hear from people honestly having a conversation about this, then this is the same thing. And I don't think they care to even understand. And I'll include the show. You can watch that. I by the way, think it's funny that we can report this a month ago, and it's breaking news in the MAGA field right now. But how about BlackRock or Panama Canal or the North American Union that Alex Jones is never going to call out because he's a part of the deep state, it seems. Kind of being facetious, but why the hell are you not calling this stuff out when you have to spend your entire career calling this stuff out and you stop when it starts happening? I find that to be pretty suspicious. As Israel's globalist ambitions become clear, Team Sport Republicans endorse North American Union. Now, Panama, Greenland, all this is part of that. Just want to show you, though, BlackRock apparently is behind the play for Panama Canal, a direct line to Donald Trump, which, by the way, shouldn't be that surprising to you, seeing as how he also allowed the overtaking of the finances of this country to BlackRock back during the COVID-19 dynamic. The COVID coup, BlackRock take over American interest. It's funny how many of the problems seem to be aligned with what Trump is allowing, and then you point to Democrats and Biden, which they're a part of it, but how often the one side that you're pretending isn't doing it rolls out the change that accomplishes what we said wasn't supposed to happen. Right in front of you. But BlackRock's only a problem when it's Democrat connected, right? Or I guess not when they're funding Elon Musk, because that's not something we're supposed to care about. The point is, all of these things continue, and the criticisms barely existing in the conversation. Or how about the war president, the peace president, excuse me. Just in, President Trump, he says, we're at final moments. Can't let them have nuclear weapons. The Iran government, who our own State Department, back when Trump was there and last Biden's, I've talked about both, have stated publicly that they're not seeking a nuclear weapon. So too have the International Atomic Energy Agency, who they use to investigate. Now, what do you think changed Trump's mind to start screaming they have nuclear weapons again? I don't know, maybe Netanyahu's direct influence on what he says, seeing as how that's the person who has been driving this conversation for 30 years based on nothing, he's been roundly proven to be wrong about everything he pushes. Here's Trump again telling you that this has to happen soon. And he says something's going to happen very soon. You're going to hear about it. Oh, good. Is that what we all wanted? That Trump's going to, apparently knows they're going to do something to Iran. And his point in here is if you don't make a deal, we're coming after you militarily. That's what he says. So is that how you make deals with people? You strong arm them? Yes, that is exactly how this government has always operated. Trump's just more vocal and on the surface about it. So now you're telling us do what we want or we're going to come after you. Now, here's what's stupid about this. They've already had a deal that they complied with to a T. Until this last administration broke it. It was called the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Now, yes, all the partisans have their talking point that are already being dumped in the chat, I'm sure. That's not how they gave the money back. Biden hit they're all BS. The bottom line is very clear. They made the agreement. Trump pulled out of it. Regardless of whether you agree with his reasonings, that was unilateral. And because he did that, which they signed agreements on in the deal, Iran was allowed to increase their enrichment. And they were allowed to continue until they met the agreements, and they never did. So Trump did that. And then they turned around and pointed to what was legally allowed within the deal and said they're violating the deal or just making nuclear weapons, even though that's still not what was happening. Increased enrichment is not the same thing. This is used for nuclear civil programs. Not all. Bottom line is, guys, of course, it could be happening somewhere secretly. Every piece of evidence other than them screaming that shows you it's not. And the bigger conversation is why we would argue they wouldn't be allowed to do what every other country in the world is allowed to do, especially somebody maniacal like Israel, who has one of the largest stockpiles in the world that, we're not supposed to talk about. The point is, right to Israel's long-sought U.S. government war with Iran, still pushing flimsy lies to get there. Quite the peace president. Or bombing Somalia, or any other number of other examples. These are not consistent with anything that was promised. And Biden is just the same. And on top of that, Responsible Statecraft reports billionaire investor and prominent private equity firm Serbia's Capital Management, one of the good guys, ladies and gentlemen, Steven Feinberg's possible ascension to the Pentagon #2 is a textbook case of the military-industrial complex revolving door. But, I always forget how to say that when it comes to my mind. The new... meet the new boss, same as the old boss, or whatever. I always forget that in the moment. The point is that it's no different, guys. It's a different flavor. And if we can't see the same damn thing or recognize this is not consistent with what the flowery picture of the deep state fighting changed world was going to be. Now, yeah, it's only been so many weeks. And yeah, we can see what happens in a month from now. But if you can't see these choices already going against that, then you're not paying attention. But I hope you're right, as always. I want it to be the positive things. But as Jason pointed out back on the 3rd, which, by the way, got 1 million views. Good for him. That's just crazy because I think this is what it looks like for people just to be fed up. No Epstein files. $16 billion in Israel in a month to Israel from the United States government. 3 U.S. airstrikes in Somalia in 2 weeks. And I argue very clearly in the interest of Israel in part. New regime, RFK Jr. pushing MMR vaccines for measles. Or the fact that they're continuing to make MMR shots for bird flu, or they're approving bird flu shots for the chickens that we're going to eat. All the things that we all said weren't supposed to happen. New regime, same playbook, different marketing, same grift. Sadly, I agree. Now, I wanted to share this, but I want to make a point about it afterward. For some reason, people thought, you tell me if my wording was opaque, that I was somehow calling out Sam Tripoli, even though we had connected many times over the years. He posted this because he has been calling this out. And he says, listen to Tinfoil Hat today and hear what will be news 6 months, a year from now. And it's Netanyahu's funding for Hamas. This is Jerusalem Post, March 4th, via Qatar, and also just directly, by the way, enables October 7th invasion. Shin Bet reveals. Breaking news. That's the joke he's making. Really? Actually, I thought I had, let me see if I can get it to pop up. Maybe this one. See if it pops up. Oh, right. We got it. Include this. The point is, clearly, as we've been calling, like Sam has, like a lot of us has, this is the State Department saying Hamas is pure evil. And I, like always, you mean the Hamas that Israel funds? That Hamas? That nobody wants to engage with if they're dishonest. And the point is, you can clearly prove they've been funding, in this case, sending Mossad to Qatar to continue the funding. That's through it's Israel, but also direct funding in other ways. Or Netanyahu stating in his own meeting that they need to continue funding Hamas to stop them from seeking two-state solution, to trick them, to manipulate the outer world. That's what this is really about. So my point is that they're now just saying that. Yeah, he funded it. Now, the question should be why? Why now? So first, hat tip to Sam for being right about this as well. And I simply said the amount, and this wasn't just about this. This was one of the many things I was seeing. The whole Ian thing was in my mind when this was shared. The amount of controlled releases, limited hangouts, taking place right now, just head spinning. Of course, it's positive new people see the long known info. That's always good. But as always, there's a point after which the powers that shouldn't be are usually okay with you seeing this kind of stuff to corral you somewhere new. Very important, never ending thing to think about. Just because something's happening that's true, yes, that's good. Period. They see it, new people recognize it, but ask why they suddenly want that to be called out. Now, yes, it could just be that, Elon Musk or Trump or Biden or whoever else, Kamala Harris, decided to show you it because they just wanted you to know the truth. What's funny when I say that, the people that are here that reflexively don't like when I say the Biden part of it are the ones that reflexively don't like the Trump part of it. It shows you that divide. The point is, it's all your government. It should matter the same way, both sides. But the point is, usually, there's an agenda there. Why would they suddenly want to? If your response is because they're fighting for me, well, that's a personal belief. You could be, right? How about we stick to the facts and what we can prove? But I simply said on top of that, just in case any of you out there were in the impression I was calling out Sam on this post, you're incorrect. I was simply agreeing with his point and adding to it. I just thought somebody else was like, why are you calling out Sam? Twitter. Now, on that note, one of these things I thought was very interesting. Now, I'm actually not going to get into the larger point about all this. Now, whatever your thoughts on Ian, and there's a lot of obvious reason to be suspicious about all this, but I do want to point out that I don't think anybody's right now proving that we know this person is deliberately deceiving people or deliberately part of some game. That's not to say that he's unwittingly doing so. But to be clear, I'm just suspicious about a lot of this, or pretty much all of it. I mean, everything about this, but the weird way that but him and others have done the same when they engage with Whitney's work, but then sort of like gaslight and undermine what she's been doing, or like call us out for being blackpilled while they later cover the exact same things in a different light. You know, again, maybe that's just because it's working, because they're getting algorithmically driven there. Maybe there's funding that we don't know about that he's not, just hasn't looked through. It doesn't know it's coming from somebody. I don't know. My point is, we don't know. That doesn't remove the obvious red flags in all of this. I just think it's always, even when it's important to err on the side of what we can prove and be objective about it. So, like I said, this in the AM Wake Up, it's just as likely that he is sort of, choosing. My point is, a lot of people out there kind of sense there might be a problem, and if that starts to kind of poke into something that undermines their larger, like what they've built, their financial security, a lot of people will just kind of go, I'm like mentally block it out. Not really know for sure if it's a problem, but never look to find out. And then that's like kind of plausible deniability. Now, to me, that's dishonesty, or either just kind of willful ignorance in case it might be. I don't know if that's happening or not. My point is, there's a big range of how this plays today. And a lot of times he points out things that I do think are important, and not even in a way that's like a burying the truth or something else. So it's up for you to decide. Express clear skepticism here because there's reason to, but also consider the points of what anybody's saying. Now, what I thought was interesting in all this is the timing, obviously. And I also lay one more point out on this. I tend to see the way that a lot of this goes is kind of a limited hangout in and of itself, where a lot of us, and this is something that I think what Paulie was saying in response to what he was doing, is that, a lot of us have been calling this out for a really long time. That's not to say that they maybe just maybe they just discovered it. I don't know. My point, though, is to agree with the general idea that a lot of times what happens is people like this, whether knowing or not, get used to sort of cement a truth light version of these things, even if it's like, yes, Israel's behind it, in a way that doesn't give people source material, doesn't allow them to understand it for themselves, and of course couches it on a very partisan Joe Rogan kind of thing. We've talked about how this works. Oh, it's on Rogan, then it must be fake. And that's their stupidity for assuming that. Just like it'd be their stupidity for assuming it's true because it's on Joe Rogan. It's the partisan game. My point, though, is that we know that's how this works. So I find it interesting that after a lot of this is becoming impossible to bury, that you get something like this, where then he becomes the focal point of attack from the Zionist mania, which he seems to be defending himself against and calling them out for it. Good. My point is that they then point at him and tear down his points that don't go into the same depth that we have, to then people then say it's been disproven. And then they conflate that with our opinion, Whitney's opinion, Derek's opinion, even though our opinions are in some ways lined up, but we have a breadth of source material and verification and objectivity that's not included in that. I think that's important to think about, how they can create a limited hangout where they undermine a point to make it seem as if it's been debunked, but through a partisan manipulation. It's very important. Now, all that being said, the point I'm really going to get into today is one of the things he mentions on here that really brings you back to the larger point of today, through AI governance, through Israeli infiltration, and the idea that these things are, undeniably interconnected. So the point is, as Adam Green points out, the InfoWars Rogan pipeline with Ian Carroll promoting the made in Israel Eric Prince Blackwater phone, which is just incredible to me that this is public information, guys. As someone like Ian Carroll, who is going through this stuff and talking about Israel and the concerns about infiltration and our Congress, and then promotes a phone that it takes 3 seconds to look up, is made in Israel, involving Unit 8200, directly tied to the NSO group of all things. I almost find that impossible, or willful ignorance. You tell me what you think, but the point out is that he discussed that phone. Now, here's what Whitney said in response to, basically, this is Ian Carroll saying, and we're live, and mentioning her, gives a shout out to her book, and then at the same time goes on to call her kind of unhinged around the technocracy conversation. Now, to be fair, I didn't watch the whole thing. I'm going off of but her and others have framed it as. You should watch it for yourself. It's just I didn't have the time to get into the longer Joe Rogan podcast, which is the same reason people are mad about my long shows. I get it. The point, though, is that it's interesting to be referencing her work, and we all know it's foundational in this larger conversation of Israel, Epstein, and technocracy. And then just sort of at the most important point, in my opinion, the clear intersection of the technocratic drive and Zionism, or specifically Silicon Valley and Zionism, where you're talking about Peter Thiel, for example. We're always a good guy. We hear. That's what he said. I don't understand how you cannot see those, as he's called these out before, or when he gets asked about this from Derek Bros on an interview. It becomes a sort of tap dance around where we think, I mean, it's maybe he just misses it. Again, it's be objective. I don't want to just start calling people controlled opposition, because that gets wildly overused. Consider that, though. But here's what he said in response. Excuse me. I really appreciate the shout outs as Ian's kind words about my book and those, but there are some things I don't think were portrayed necessarily accurately about my work, both regarding Epstein and otherwise, and I think I should take the time to clarify those things. I'm not looking to cast shade on anyone with this clarification, just that I think I'm the most qualified person to represent my own work, and when other people do it, not on my behalf, but their own, I can sometimes lead to misconceptions. My interest is ultimately in my work being accurately conveyed, particularly to large audiences. Obviously, the best way to understand my book is to read it, but many who watch the Rogan podcast, for example, won't. I would happily make these clarifications on Rogan's platform or another platform of similar size if I ever got invited. One thing I'd like to clarify is that my books do not make the claim that Epstein was Mossad. The book instead argues that Epstein was an important part of a network, though arguably middle management, for a group composed of transnational, I don't know if that's, is that actually, is that how you say that? I'm going to look that up. Oh, no, I misread it. I'm sorry. I thought it said transnational, transgenerational organized crime interests. That's interesting. That's actually more important. I was reading it as transnational for some reason. I thought it was a typo. The point, though, first, is she's also not saying that there's not a connection there. She's just trying to be very objective and specific about what the work shows. We know that people like Acosta and others and other work that's it's very clearly shown, in my opinion, based on the different examples of whether it's Acosta or the deeper evidentiary points coming back to their intelligence connections of Epstein himself with the, like Ehud Barak, for example, and others. The point is you can show lines directly to Mossad and CIA, at the very least being used by them. Whether it's an agent or not, that's a nuanced point that can be discussed. I think it's very clear. So the point is that gets represented as basically she's saying it's Israel, right? And that's how this tends to go, even though that's not even inaccurate when you look at the larger picture. In my opinion, I'll say, speaking for myself, I think it's important to not make it so blunt. And that's how these Zionists make it about, you hate Jewish people. And it's a very clear cycle. Whether he knows he's doing that or not, or whether he meant that, or whether you even think he did it, the point is the same. Now, it says, most of whom are the remnant of a Jewish mob component of the national crime syndicate and who promote ethno-fascist policies, including via their ethnically focused philanthropy, among other activities. Now, that is not a racial point. That's a simple fact. The Jewish mob was very prevalent in the Prohibition time and had a very outsized role in this conversation. She cites it all in her book. But that, again, is what gets taken out of context. And it says, and other factions within both American and Israeli intelligence. They are not synonymous with either intelligence agency, but arguably dominate the leadership of those intelligence agencies. This is what she talks about the, tri-national intelligence state, where these things are kind of superseding these governments. Now, that's what you call a deep state, guys, or in one fashion. And so, right now, I think we see that, especially when you recognize this blackmail sexual network was used by these people for what? To gain information, to control them. And look at what's happening with the current administration. And it says, evidence for Epstein's ties to Israeli intelligence links him with Israeli military intelligence as opposed to Mossad, which are different parts of the Israeli intelligence apparatus. Very fair point. So, just instead of just saying, it's like saying NSA instead of CIA or FBI instead of, it matters, doesn't it? Or you just broadly can say intelligence, but she's saying military intelligence. Very important point. For example, it would be like confusing the DIA with the CIA. However, as noted above, Epstein was ultimately working for a network that greatly influences and exerts significant control over both the U.S. and Israel, among other places. And that network is more loyal to itself than any one nation, and also involves multiple intelligence agencies. Now, to me, I think that represents the infiltration by this entity. Now, you can make it about Israel, which is just the central point of where it comes from. To me, it's about Zionism. It is not about one. It's about using all of these locations. So that's why you see Trudeau calling himself a Zionist. You see Biden calling himself a Zionist. You see most of Trump's cabinet calling themselves Zionists. It's not hard to see what you're looking at. So yes, it involves multiple agencies, but is that because it's been always been a national, international dynamic, or is it because that's what it's grown to be? That's something for you to consider. While many people do casually use Mossad as a catch-all term for Israeli intelligence, I don't agree with that, and not making the accurate distinction creates an opening for dishonest actors. That's exactly what I'm saying. To discredit the work I and others have done on the topic when not framed properly, she says. And it's important because that's what you're right now. You're going to see the typical characters out there trying and specifically honing in on Ian without ever talking about Whitney or even tagging, because they don't want you to see the work. They want you to undermine. They want you to use him to dismiss the work. That's how this works, whether he meant to do that or not. And it says, another thing I'd like to clarify is the implication that my historical reporting on the Epstein case is commendable. Is the implication that my historical reporting on Epstein case is commendable, while my more current reporting on Technocracy is significantly less so. Her point being the comment about how basically this work is good, but she's kind of unhinged around this Technocracy topic. She says, my book on Epstein concludes with an entire chapter discussing how Epstein became irrelevant and thus expendable because the union of big tech with the intelligence apparatus, particularly those intelligence agencies most corrupted by the Epstein network. Again, the point is, it's not, we call it the Epstein network because we know of Epstein. As she pointed out a second ago, the point is he's one entity. He's a cog in the larger wheel of sexual blackmail and intelligence manipulations. To think he was somehow leading this is factually incorrect. That's why it's important to get these listed. I don't think they're ever really going to show you. But it says, with a major focus on national security contractor Palantir and its co-founder, Peter Thiel. That you arguably could highlight the fact that essentially what this shifted into. Not necessarily sexual blackmail, maybe, but you can see clearly that the push has always been in the same direction. And I think all these entities are driving in that same direction. Now that's what I think the evidence shows, but I think you need to consider all the interconnected points as her books and her amazing work around this has shown. And you can see these people now built into the power structure that is then, weirdly enough, rolling out exactly what they all thought they would roll out eventually. I guess it's just one big coincidence. Well, Ian is an admitted fan of my book. She says the reporting on Technocracy that he describes as more of a turnoff for most than my Epstein book is actually in the book on Epstein itself, and is arguably the main conclusion as it related to the present from the book. So it's an interesting point. Now, was it a misspeak? As if it's a separate book? Or does it mean he didn't even read them? That's certainly possible, because it's not a separate book. It's in it's part 1 and 2 of the same book, right? She doesn't have a specific Technocracy book. So interesting, right? Might suggest that it was just a point about, referencing that for a reason to then go off and say, here's why it's also bad. Like arguably to gaslight about what is most importantly happening right now, in my opinion, the technocratic overtaking of this country. Obviously, that's my opinion. You can decide on what's more important or whether that's even happening. But it's interesting timing, is it not? To bury that right now, using that, it's just fascinating. But it says there, I note that Palantir is the privatization and recreation of a nefarious neocon project developed by top figures from the Iran-Contra scandal, and how tools like it and its Unit 8200 developed equivalents from Israel have amassed so much information on us. A huge point of today, which is what DOGE is doing, which I think is a direct pipeline to Israeli intelligence, and can also plant false and incriminating evidence on one's devices without their knowledge, have made the type of sex blackmail ops once practiced by Epstein and other figures mentioned in the book no longer needed or relevant. See the point? They've technologically progressed to the point to where they don't need the physical videotapes anymore. How long have we been saying that? Now, funny enough, I'm not going to get into it because it's a whole other topic, but soon we're going to talk about the Take It Down Act. That's the point about Melania and Trump now leaning into the idea that, okay, well, it's deep fake revenge porn. Sure, no one's going to disagree with that. Take it down, right? Or it's like the online safety bill. Children being bullied. Yeah, we all support that, except when they then use those bills to then go after anything else. Now, I'll go through it. It seems at the moment the definitions are pretty clear, but as always, these things can alter. My point would be that this opens the door to claiming something's an AI deepfake when it might not be, and removing it, forcing platforms to do so, which Twitter's already shown a willingness to comply, or another variation of that. But the interesting point is that that's where this leads, is this kind of blackmail using things like that, whether fake or gotten, taken from some kind of refrigerator camera or, whatever else is going on. Now it says, she goes on to say, I am not sure if Ian has discussed Teal or Palantir very much, really not that much, to be honest, I could say. I don't believe he has, but I may be wrong on that. But that's what she says, but a lot of my concerns about technocracy and the current administration are intimately related to both, and those concerns are very well documented in One Nation Under Blackmail, part 1 and 2. Remember, it's a 2-part book, which was published even before the official confirmation of the Teal-Epstein meetings. It's amazing how many connections there are to this administration, or really just our government is the accurate way to frame that. It's not unique to partisan. And continuing, it says, of course, Peter Thiel's errand boy now being vice president, that's Vance, J.D. Vance, of the U.S., and the many Thiel or Palantir adjacent figures let me see if I got that one to pop right up. Yeah, perfect. Here's one of them, and I think the other one's connected in here. Derek wrote this. Meet the Peter Thiel acolytes in Donald Trump's second administration. Oh, yeah, and the link's right down here to the other one. And he follows up and specifically gets into Curtis Yarvin and sort of the philosophy driving what they're doing. Both are very important. I'll include those for you. They'll be at the bottom again for those looking for the show notes, since I'm adding them during show. Meet Peter Thiel's acolytes. I mean, it's everyone, guys. It's crazy. I mean, most of these people have a connection back to that entity. And knowing that that's basically total information awareness from our government that's been privatized, knowing they're literally working with Israel to commit genocide, knowing that, I mean, it doesn't end. It's unreal to me how this is not the most obvious thing in the world to some people, or that they ignore it. And it says the adjacent figures of the administration made this not politically expedient to point out, particularly if basically him not calling it out for that reason, and saying that the current administration is a major departure from the Epstein network, claiming that, which she argues in her book as well as today, that it is not likely not. But it says, in that same vein, I think it is important to push back as nicely as possible on Ian's suggestion that Eric Prince's unplugged phone, which we're going to talk about next, seems to be a good investment for those concerned about illegal surveillance. While Ian has since described that as an offhanded comment and that he hasn't researched the phone, insane. I think both he and everyone should know the following. I mean, you're going to support a phone like that? So that's my point, is that I just find that to be a problem. Certainly could just be irresponsibility. But to think about it as something that might, when you stand back and look at the bigger picture, what's not being discussed and what continues to happen. But it says Prince has a close relationship with the higher Unit 8200 alumnus, and co-founders of the Epstein and Thiel funded network, Carbine 911, which we've talked about a lot, which seeks to harvest as much data off your phone as possible when you call 911 and feed the same pre-crime paradigm that the data that Palantir is also seeking. Now, the point we're going to get into today more than anything is the data that they're scooping from the systems they have access to. That's DOGE, and the same thing, which I think is a pipeline to the Israeli government. And I think what we're seeing right now is a very clear siphoning off of the information for this AI structure that's being built, not for your interest. Now, these are all my opinions, but I'm going to lay out the facts today for why I think this is happening. With this woman, her name is, I think we'll just go over the actual article, which is these parts we're going to read again. But it says, to conclude, I am more than happy to and very capable of representing my own work to any audience. And when other people try to present my work instead of me, even well-intentioned, it can lead to misconceptions. So let's go through this point about the red pill phone, the MAGA phone, the freedom phone, all the names for the same thing Eric Prince is putting forward that just so happens to be built in Israel by intelligence, that is using a group that is proven to have hacked and spied on Americans. That's not a joke. It's one of the easiest parts to prove in this conversation. Here is Casey Hoffinke, simply pointing out, well, on the back of that point, what you're seeing right now is the Zionist effort to scream about how he never calls out Qatar. And the obvious point to anyone barely paying attention is that, as we already showed you, Qatar is just basically a funnel for Israel to manipulate these situations. So for them, they're just trying to make it sound like he's only blaming them. But look, it's Qatar funding Hamas or whatever. See, anyone who's been already primed with what we've been doing over the years sees right through that. But a lot of people don't have the tools because they look at partisan media or mainstream alternative media, which is kind of the same, which gives you talking points and screenshots on a big desk instead of actual source material for you to learn and read and understand for yourself. Most importantly, if you disagree with the way I frame it. So that way you can have an honest conversation about these things and not be shocked and taken off guard by these kind of conversations. But she says the Qatar push is so obvious now. The technocrats are setting themselves up as the heroes against the evil Muslims. The Vance, Teal, Musk, Prince regime isn't going to be fun, y'all. So here, I reposted her article today on Substack just to get it some more reach. It's a good article. Here it is on TLAV. Let's go through some points. Now, some of the ones, the main point I'm going to make about the phone, but I wanted to reiterate some of these points we've gone over in the past. Simply for this example about Carbine 911, now actually just Carbine. I mean, it's so funny. How long have we been telling you that Israeli startup intelligence companies are overtaking 911 call centers? People look at you like you're crazy. It's just because, think about how wild that is, that we can prove these are things that are happening in real time. And the fact, it's like saying, I mean, I can't even think of a good example, like just something that's so normal. And just because we're supposed to, the point is that it's easy to prove, but because you're not supposed to believe that's happening because there's some kind of weird mental block about maybe being racist if you call out Israel, that people just go, that can't be true. And it's literally happening. And now we're at a point where it's more, not just happening, it's long since been done. And this is, she writes, for instance, Carbine's smartphone app. So again, Carbine 911 call centers run by Unit 8200 Israeli startup companies that are basically able to, and actually, you know what? Let me grab that clip that she said. That's, I think it was on, I forget the show. Hold on. Let me grab this from this clip that we recently played where she's basically just talking about the, oh, come on. Tell me I can't have that in here. Oh, that's frustrating. I guess I don't have it. Well, basically she's talking about the access that Israel has to the nuclear facilities, to water infrastructure. It's a lot. And the problem is that people act like it's our greatest ally. Well, if you look at even briefly, without partisan lens, about how many times Israel has abused this relationship, or really, if you just don't ever have two brain cells to rub together and look through, when's the last time Israel did anything that benefited this country? The reality is it's been using this country, and that's why our politicians are bought off, controlled, blackmailed, and threatened to now be blind Zionist supporters screaming America first, is that you can clearly see that these things have gone without a hitch, and that they undermine American interests, and they actually are putting your life in danger in some degree. Like if they wanted to pull this, don't forget during October 7th, post that, you had a lot of Israeli politicians literally basically throw veiled threats at Americans and say, if you don't do this, then you're going to be next. And of course, they wanted to sound like, oh, it's Hamas coming to you, even though that's very unlikely and logical, doesn't make sense. But also remember, Israel funds Hamas. See how that comes around. But for instance, Carbine's smartphone app, which was built after in conjunction with these centers to where you can use the app to call 911 and see the AI Technocracy direction. And it says, extracts the following information from the phones in which it's installed. Now, the point in this is there's phones coming out where it's already installed. Now, interestingly enough, I don't know whether it'd be on the MAGA phone. I bet you that's probably exactly where it would be, but it's coming out in certain devices without you deciding that. And it says device location is what's taken from the phone. Video live streamed from the phone. Text messages, two-way chats, data from user's phone if they have the Carbine app. Any information that comes over a data link, which Carbine opens the case when the caller link drops out. And it says Carbine stores all the data it takes on past calls and events. You know, sort of like the Authentics point, where they take all your biometric data just to gently and totally benignly approve who you are for Twitter, even though they don't need biometrics to do so. And that Unit 8200 Israeli company keeps that data. That's all happening right now. Everywhere you look, these things are happening. I don't know why honest conservatives can't see it, which I think most of them do, but Twitter's still using Authentics to this very day. This is an Israeli intelligence-connected company that is stealing your biometrics as we speak. Here's Carbine 911, another one of these companies started by Israeli intelligence, populated all over this country like chickenpox, that are literally storing everything you say if you use this app. I'm arguing at this point it's probably beyond our control, whether an app or not. My opinion. But this says, going forward, in regard to the point that I often make about why these startup companies are a problem. They admit publicly they use these as extensions of the Israeli government agenda. And it says the same article also contains the stunning revelation. The link to the article is right here. So you can read it for yourself if you want to check it out directly from the article where they're citing the intelligent entities that are telling you this. And it says the stunning revelation that many Israeli companies, including Black Cube, used by Weinstein, one of the famous examples, have been, and by the way, to harass, threaten his victims. These are Mossad agents working for this Israeli startup company who are here threatening people connected to the Weinstein, which, by the way, connects back to the Epstein larger network. But it says, have been founded as fronts for intelligence operations since 2012. It states, their quote, Since 2012, cyber-related intelligence projects that were previously carried out in-house, as in the government, in the Israeli military, and Israel's main intelligence arms are transferred to companies that in some cases were built for this exact purpose. That's an intelligence front, guys. That's an Israeli government military creating front companies that really have companies and products, but through those companies, they are infiltrating anywhere, wherever they're happening. It just couldn't be more clear, as we've talked about many times. Israel's global cybersecurity infiltration. Now, the main point to this, actually one more thing I want to read. It says, in addition, TRT World notes the company Dark Matter, one of the examples of the article that they're connected back to Israel, and a UAE surveillance and intelligence group that employs former U.S. intelligence operatives, attracted the attention of Chinese officials as Smart Cities Conference in 2015. Dark Matter, which was launched to modernize Emirati UAE intelligence and military operations, signed a global strategic memorandum of understanding with Huawei, the Chinese tech giant. So you have Israeli Unit 8200 startup connected companies making agreements with Chinese Huawei companies. See, and then this is something that our government's all concerned. I mean, it's the same. It's basically part of the same interconnected spy network. And it says the middle man in this sale was none other than Eric Prince himself. So he's connecting deals with these connected. It makes sense when you stand back and look at everything he's connected to. He's a central part in why this is all happening in this article. Because the point is about what's her name? It's Letitia. Yeah, I can't remember this woman in the picture right here. It's probably stand out to me. Oh, I think I don't want to. I forget her name. It's in the article. She's an Israeli spy. I've mentioned her many times. It's probably, I can't. Oh, wait, is that it? I give up on it. You guys can look into it for yourselves. The point is that she is an Israeli spy publicly, and connected with Prince through Comframe, Carbine, and the point being is they're openly telling you that they basically, what's the word I'm looking for? They court is the word I'm looking for. U.S. companies connected directly to U.S. intelligence, so arguably the point is can infiltrate those companies. And arguing that Eric Prince is serving as sort of like a token U.S. entity so that they don't have to sign other documents as being an outside force doing so. This is what's happening in the current government right now, acting like there is no issue. There's no conflicts of interest. Yeah, we didn't even have to sign anything, right? So who knows? But it goes on to say, Lesham is her last name. Lesham and other Prince, other associates, Dorian Barak, also have business ties to UAE via their prominent roles in the UAE Israel Business Council. As TRT World concluded, with similar technology being used and the same mercenary middleman, Eric Prince, between Carbine and China, who brought together UAE's dark matter surveillance technology with China, indications point to a likely transfer of surveillance technology from Epstein's Israeli company to China. So you need to really start thinking about how beyond the partisan, nonsensical points we get today. I honestly think that nothing we get from the partisan conversation is accurate. It's all cartoonish bubbles of conversation. The reality is, and as James has talked about for years, the back pipeline to China from Israel for the United States. Just look at the lockstep during COVID-19 and realize that there's something beyond what we see that is really driving a lot of this. And so here, at the very least, you can see through Prince, through Epstein's connection network, you see Israeli and China ultimately sharing information. But really, I think what it's about is, if you want to make it about specifically one problem, it's Israel playing out all sides. Or specifically to this country, it's Israel having infiltration into our tech that then has connections back to arguable adversaries. Historically, that should be a problem. Now, here's how it finishes. Comframe is a very suspect company. It is highly, highly secretive, targets sensitive American military agencies with foreign technology, and its known employees are apparent spooks and intelligence-linked mercenaries. Not only that, but the history of Israeli espionage in the United States, which you need to look into if you're not familiar with, from Jonathan Pollard to Promise, which there's many. Promise software is another previous example. We'll get into the NSO group and Pegasus. How many times we need the Israeli government to be caught spying on Americans or our American government before we recognize that they're not an ally? I don't know. But from Jonathan Pollard to Promise to to Comverse and beyond shows a concerted effort to target the American military and security agendas, often with bugged or backdoored technology. Now think about the MAGA phone again here. That's where she's getting to. In addition to the above, Prince has also recently engaged in efforts to market a very suspect smartphone to MAGA Republicans as being unhackable, unsurveillable. Even the mainstream coverage of this was like, that's completely inaccurate. But it says that phone was designed in Israel. That's publicly cited by Eric Prince. And the company that produces it is called Unplugged. All the links are in here too. It's just behind the yellow. According to reports, Unplugged's, quote, day-to-day technology operations are run by Aaron Karpin, a former employee of Communitake, the Israeli startup that gave rise to the new, now infamous hacker-for-hire firm, NSO Group. I mean, really take a second to digest that. Karpin, like Lesham, is also a veteran of Unit 8200. So we're talking about like the notorious NSO Group, which we're going to show you again in a second, has already been caught more than once illegally using this software, or their software, to spy on Americans, to spy on American students. And this phone is created, run by a former employee of that startup. I just find that to be insane. And it's just a jumping around of these different people. Notably, Dark Matter, the UAE private intelligence company that was mentioned earlier due to its association with Prince, once marketed an ultra-secure phone called Katim, only to be later outed for hacking dissidents and journalists. Surprise, surprise. No connection there, right? In addition, Prince debuted Unplugged's phone on Steve Bannon's War Room program. Both Prince and Bannon have controversial relationships with exiled Chinese billionaire, I think it's Gao Wenju, also known as Miles Gao. We've talked about this more than once. I believe, let me see if this pops up. Yep, there you go. I'll include this one. This Matt Ehret wrote this article. It's an important one. It's called Steve Bannon and China's Deep State. Now, going forward, that Prince would help market this phone specifically to MAGA Republicans is disturbing, given that his associate, Lesham, another known and publicly acknowledged Israeli intelligence veteran, and operatives have played a major role in developing the infrastructure for the U.S. war on domestic terror, which is mainly targeted at the political right and has already utilized mass surveillance through smartphones and other technologies to justify arrests, including pre-crime arrests against Republicans. It's the same point I make about quickly when I say they called you anti-Semites for your red hats and the trucker convoy. Guys, you forget that time frame? It's amazing the people that have been turned around to start screaming you're an anti-Semite to people that are calling for an end to genocide. Either whatever you think about them, it's the same thing that was used against you. And these same people who you're now fighting for were the ones that did it to you. It says, given the consent of the content of this investigation, Prince's ties to foreign governments and intelligence agencies should be heavily scrutinized, especially Conframe, whose secretive activities may be drastically undermining American national security. Now, the point is about the phone and the overlap today, but Conframe is a direct infiltration into national security intelligence in this country. That because of Prince and the overlap, they act like it's just an American company. We're being played, guys. I mean, and everywhere you look, you know how often I hope that I'm wrong about this, guys. It's unnerving to see how much this continues, even though it's obvious. This is an infiltration. Maybe they're just showing you what it's always been. Who knows? All I hope is that you can consider this. Now, that's the article we already referenced. Now, here's just a mainstream article, 2022. Eric Prince wants to sell you a secure smartphone that's too good to be true. Just show you 2 points I want to make in this. Read it for yourself. It's mainstream, but they're just basically saying these claims don't appear to be accurate. And it's not even getting into what we were talking about. It's just like whether it is actually what they claim it is. But it says, boasting falsely that Unplugged has built the first operating system free of big tech monetization and analytics, which, by the way, is patently false. Right down in our show notes, by the way, you can get an above phone if you would like to get one that is literally using what they actually reference in this. I think it's Graphene OS. It's a system that is actually de-Googled and is not tied to Israeli governments. The point is, boasting falsely that Unplugged has done that, Prince bragged that the device is protected by government-grade encryption. Yeah, which government? Better yet, the pitch added, Unplugged is to be hosted on a global array of server farms so that it, guess what, can never be taken offline. One option is said to be a server farm on a vessel located in undisclosed location on international waters, connected to satellite via Elon Musk's Starlink. An Unplugged spokesperson explained that, guess what, guys? They benefit in having servers that are not subject to any government law. And the point becomes clear. So, what happens when they find out that they've been spying and collecting all this data from you? Well, too bad. We're maritime law. We're in the middle of the ocean. Or whatever you want to consider. The point is to boast that you're not bound by law while you're literally hosting people's data. I mean, that seems like you almost deserve to be played. It seems crazy to me. And then considering the Israeli infiltration, you can clearly, and this isn't even about infiltration. This is public stated Israeli intelligence connected companies. And then even more so an employee directly tied back to the NSO group, which is nefarious, notorious, not subject to governmental law. Sure sounds like what Israel tends to do. And you can just see these are the same screenshots you're going to see floating around the show Made in Israel. And it says in the article, now it says Unplugged's day-to-day technology, even in this article, says are run by the Karpin, the Israeli startup company, Community Take, that gave rise to the now infamous hacker for hire NSO group. Right. So this is important. Karpin built the intact phone, which the company called a military-grade mobile device. He also is a veteran of Unit 8200, the agency that conducts cyber espionage and is the country's equivalent of NSA. So it wasn't just some phone he's involved. He built a Israeli intelligence phone and then marketed it through these different groups. Now here, just as also Eric Prince, making sure you know that he provided the information to Israel that allowed them to flood Gaza, which has caused untold amounts of disease, death. I mean, any number of things. This was a crime. Unequivocally a crime. But here he is boasting about it. Don't forget the infiltration is important, guys, all across the world. Israeli government infiltration, and really just my larger opinion. I've included these shows for the podcast, so you can watch them. The new Trump administration and the technocratic Zionist coup of the United States. Now, this brings us to the point of these groups and the conversation of the college shutdown. This is something from Derek on November 30th. Meet the spyware companies preparing to unleash their tech during Trump's second term. Referencing the NSO group, Pegasus is the point. And these are all, it's just fun. They're allowing this to happen, even though it's directly tied back to the same groups that have already been caught literally breaking the law. That's the blind support for Israel coming from the Trump administration or the Biden administration, but we're currently in the Trump administration. He also covered this following up January 7th, a couple months ago. Israeli spyware firm NSO Group found liable for hacks of WhatsApp users. So they're in many ways. This is not the first time they're being caught. That is literally the person involved with making the phone for the group that the NSO group, the Pegasus software is tied to Eric Prince, is making the phone for you that is also still through that group tied back to Israeli intelligence. It just seems like a no-brainer to me. Like if this was Chinese intelligence, would you be okay with that? It shouldn't be. If it was the CIA, if you told Americans they had a phone built by the CIA, would you buy it? Why would you buy one connected to Israeli intelligence? Why is that different or better? It's willful ignorance. So my point in this is to connect this with what's currently happening. So not only are you being played into supporting this infiltration, with these very groups overlapped, they're using these same groups, the NSO groups, to spy on American activists. So think about the overlap there. As you're being played, just put the phone in your pocket, they're also using this to spy on the activists that are calling them out. And then you're turning around and calling them racist and trying to shut that down from happening. You're being used. Here, this goes back to 2022. So it's not just Americans, by the way. The Israeli government is using it to spy on their own people who don't like what they're doing. Same old government stuff, guys. It's not like they're all in unison fighting for the Jewish people. It's a lie, guys. It's a false construct. I argue most Jewish people right now are very uncomfortable with the reality of what they're learning about what Zionism is. At the very least, there's a massive growing movement of people in the world, Jewish Orthodox groups that are calling this out and have been for a very long time. We'll get to one example in a minute. My point, though, police used invasive tech by second Israeli company to target activists. Guess which one? The NSO group. Shocking. So they're even spying on their own people, Jewish or otherwise, because it doesn't matter, guys. It's about Zionism. But as the nation covered, they're using the same thing against you today. Israel's war on American student activists using the same kind of technology. 2023. Also, what we just recently covered, 2025. This Qatar U.S. group, The far-right group building a list of pro-Palestine activists to deport. And they're literally using Americans. They're using the people they're highlighting as like wearing a Palestinian flag and then reporting them to ICE to get them deported, many of which are just Americans. This is being abused publicly by Zionism, by Israel, and they're proudly displaying this. And your government doesn't care. Now here is Greenblatt. Just a leaked audio telling you the problem is not about left and right. It's about the generational gap. And that's why they're so aggressively targeting our people in colleges and below that. Your children in the schools. That's what all this comes down to. And when we get to the AI influence on the schooling, I mean, everything, it gets alarming to see how much they can influence, if not already using this AI rollout, if Israel's driving the bus. Or even the people we're looking at, if it's not, I mean, I think it's obvious the reins that have been placed on this administration. But either way, the rollout is concerning for a lot of reasons. But here's what Greenblatt wanted you to know. Or rather, didn't want you to know, but we found out.
This is not a left-right gap, folks. The issue in the United States in support for Israel is not left and right. It is young and old. And so we really have a TikTok problem, a Gen Z problem, that our community needs to put the same brains that gave us TLAV, the same brains that gave us all these other amazing innovations, need to put our energy toward this, like, fast. Because again, like we've been chasing this left-right divide, it's the wrong game. The real game is the next generation. We saw a dramatic change in the language of the activists here in America on October the 8th. The language of groups that we've long tracked, who've long been problematic, like Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voices for Peace. The language I could show you from their toolkits, because our analysts are in their groups. We saw this again on October the 8th. It was that fast.
All right. So as always, don't miss the fact that you have this Israeli company, which is what they are, openly. I guess now, again, I always do that. I always forget it's leaked. Now known that they have spies, literal spies in Jewish organizations in America. But remember, it's the one I always forget, Jewish Voice for Peace and Jewish Voice of America. They're the largest group. They were putting on most of the protests that were called anti-Semitic, Colombia and elsewhere. And they're using that to then go after the protests today. It's insane. It's obvious. To call them racist, it is insulting to your intelligence, or rather anti-Semitic. That's not to say it's not possible. The point is you can listen to them, and we'll get there in a second. But what he wants you to know is that we can't allow that. We need to start. We've been watching them. I mean, even just the idea that this company is watching American students and tracking what they say. Why is that allowed in any context? Because we're not supposed to criticize Israel is the point. And you damn well know that, guys. It's not okay. And it's time to start calling it out. It has nothing to do. It has nothing to do with racism. That's not to say there's never an intersection. In fact, the largest intersection comes from those trying to make it about racism, to make it seem like what we do is racist, when in fact it's not. That is the game. And many Zionists are calling it out, or many Israelis or Jews are calling it out today and highlighting that Zionism is a problem. So in general, though, this is always ongoing, whether it's the spy devices they found in the last Trump administration at the White House that nobody cared about, that were literally proven to be from Israel, or the different times they've attacked U.S. military installations or ships or, whatever else, all the amazing things they've done. The point is that they're constantly being caught spying on this country. Now, Max Blumenthal just makes an excellent point that it's like they're not even trying to hide this stuff anymore. Axios reported Israel learned, it says, while Trump administration consulted with Israel about the possibility of engaging with Hamas, Israel learned about aspects of the talks through other channels. As Max simply points out, so Israel's spying on the Trump administration and leaking its sensitive diplomatic moves to the press, which is not even remotely new. They do that constantly to drive the conversation in a way that makes them look like they have influence and control over this country, which they very clearly do, in my opinion. But here is where we get to the part about the protest. And I think, again, the premise on this needs to be very simple. The suppression of speech around anything, racism, anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim, anti-Christian, it is censorship, guys. Rather specifically, it is a violation of your First Amendment. It's only censorship when it comes to the government doing it against individuals. I'll make that point in a second. Or rather specifically, a violation of free speech from your government, not a school. Now, there's a conversation to be had there, of course, why they are allowed to suppress them. But the point is about censorship and free speech. And the reality being that the government pulling funding, that's completely within their purview. The argument that they're doing so because of speech is a violation of your rights. That it's so simple as that. And on top of that, the bigger picture is that they are then through that driving that action. Now, what kills me is that there are, as always, the typical sycophants out there that will ignore the obvious because they like what's happening. And what's even more insulting are the people that were the most vocal about the big bad Democrats, who I agree at the time were ridiculous in the points they were making. And I'm like not different now. I see them as all ridiculous. My point is that at the time, the points they were making, they're fair, right? They are ridiculous. Well, look at what they're doing. That's crazy. But the most vocal ones are the ones that turn right around and do the same and act like it's not happening or ignore it because it's not what they want to call out. Like the woke right and the woke left, guys, is what it really is. And them getting people fired for making bad jokes online about Trump's being assassination attempt. Clearly, these people are the same thing, and I think they even somewhere internally know it, if not, don't care. So, Libs of TikTok highlights this, and to be clear, just quotes what she says. But this is the kind of Elon Musk endorsement today, where you just go, interesting, and then get it 1,000. I mean, that's the point. This account now has 4 million views. So when they just point to something, it gets an exponential amount of views. That's the point. So this is support. And especially since you can go on to prove that they very clearly have consistently supported this exact kind of action against people that are calling out Israel. I simply tagged it. Well, let's do it first. Here is Secretary Linda McMahon.
Tell you, the president has said he's absolutely not going to allow federal funds to be going to these universities that continue to allow anti-Semitism on its campus. And
that's right there. That alone is clear. You're not going to allow, and he has said that. He's not trying to hide it. You're not going to allow funding to go to schools that allow what? Anti-Semitism. She didn't say violence. Now, that's the way they're trying to play this. If violence is committed, it's a crime. You already have the tools to stop that. You can expel somebody. If you choose, you can pull their funding. That's all there. Whether or not it's because of a racist act. Violence is violence. They're conflating these things, and that's exactly what they said the left was doing before, because they were. So you're the same thing. You're becoming exactly what you thought you were fighting. If you're honest enough to see that, start calling it out. The point is, you're going to stop funding to the school if they allow speech. That's what anti-Semitism is. Make it anti-Christian, make it anti-Muslim. It's all speech, right? You're allowed to say and feel what you want. I can say you're a disgusting person if you feel a certain way that I think is disgusting. That's all free speech. These people are literally rolling out that you're not allowed to say certain things if it's against Israel. And everybody who is like wearing badges that they're fighting for free speech are the ones cheering this on. It's the great inversion, I guess. I mean, I began to wonder if there is some larger psychological operation happening with how people can't see how obvious this is. Or again, maybe it's that they really do, and it's because of how controlled the media sphere is, and we just don't see all of their comments. I mean, realize, guys, the world does not only exist on Twitter. There's a large world of people out there that are just fed up with how dumb all this is, that just check out. That's part of it too. I mean, trust me, I feel like doing that half the time anyway, because I'm so fed up with how the fever pitch is just such nonsense all the time. And I'm not saying my opinion. I'm talking about people that are screaming subjective, unproven, unverified things. And the argument becomes back and forth between two things that no one can prove. I mean, it's exhausting. Some days I'm just like, it's just the pitch is too high. I'm going to let it drown out. So this is unconstitutional. Anyone anywhere saying that's not the case, you should call out. There's no air in this conversation. You either can agree that this should be the way it should be and say that, well, limited speech is what I believe in because we're not allowed to your anti-Semitism just should not be allowed. It's so vile. Okay. I disagree with the part that it shouldn't be allowed. I agree. Anti-Semitism or any kind of racism is vile. But if we can have a conversation and we can debate whether limited speech versus free speech, absolute is what it should be. That I'm all okay with. I'm not going to be angry or mad that you have a difference of opinion. That's what partisanship wants from you. We can have an amicable conversation about things that we disagree on, even if it gets serious and heated. We can have an amicable conversation. These people want you to call what they're doing free speech, so you either start believing that, if, free speech except for Israel, or so they cement in your mind that whatever they tell you is what it is. Everything means nothing, nothing means everything. I hope you can see through it.
Is something we're not going to do. And I think there are a lot of different ways to look at that. And that funding supports research. It supports many other programs that the universities offer. So if universities like Columbia, and the Department of Education has launched 5 investigations now into different universities to make sure that they are not allowing anti-Semitism. Kids ought to be able to go to college, and parents ought to feel good about their kids going to college, knowing they're in a safe environment.
Okay, well, by the way, I won't go into that. This is funny that now we're talking about safe areas. Really? Are you just the Democrats now? That's kind of funny. But so the point, obviously, guys, is if we're talking about again, violence is already dealt. There's already crimes. You can be expelled. Okay, which we'll get to more about some examples. But what about the other side of this conversation? Are you actually of the mind that only Jewish people should be protected in this conversation, or of the mind that only whatever you want to claim Semites are should be protected? What about people who were attacked by people claiming to be the Israeli? Really, again, I'm making it more convoluted because I'm trying to be accurate about it. Zionists that are out there, whether Jewish or otherwise, who are making it about themselves, attacking somebody who has a Palestinian flag. Endless amounts of videos of those, just like there's videos of everything we can talk about. What about them? Are they not people at the school? Do they not deserve to have safety? Why is it? And quite frankly, I think we can prove at this point, as we've done many times, that there was an outsized role played by the Zionist creating that conflict, as even the police were calling out. Well, but either way, let's just say it was both happening. Why is only one being condemned? Why is only one being dealt with? Why is only one? Obviously, you already know the answer to this, because there's one entity controlling and dictating and threatening, blackmailing, and whatever else, driving this administration to achieve what it is. That's why they're funding the genocide. That's why they've given them $16 billion plus. That's all against what they said they would do. That's why they're allowing I could go on forever. The genocide should be enough, quite frankly.
And to allow this kind of unrest, this is not about freedom of speech. We're talking about violence on campus.
I know. Oh, and there you go. And the shoe drops, right? Well, no, you weren't talking about violence. You were talking about speech. Now you're talking about violence. Well, guess what? Hey, there's a law for that. There's already something in place. If they're violent, arrest them. So what's the point here? Them clumsily, if not I don't know whether it's deliberate or not, either so to play you or because they're that stupid, conflating violence with anti-Semitism in order to make this make sense. And now the entire talking point partisan argument is that, are you okay with violence on campus? Well, who's talking about violence? I thought we were talking about speech. If there's violence, you don't need some new law. It's already there. It's very logically simple, isn't it? The problem is that people are dishonest in this conversation.
And college presidents need to call in the police right away. They have to quell these uprisings and not allow faculty to be attacked or other students to be attacked. So
okay, yeah, I agree. How about the faculty that was attacked repeatedly by the Zionists? Oh, but we don't care about that one. I care about all of them, whether it's a Palestinian flag waver or somebody screaming Zionist chants. Both of them, if they commit a crime against somebody else, should be held accountable. Oh my God, it's crazy, right? Crazy how objectivity seems like it's. It is weird today. It feels like that it's the minority in the conversation, but that's not real. I think that's just in the controlled fear. That's my opinion. But here, oh man, StreamYard's acting pretty funny today, guys. That is strange. Okay, sorry. Continuing. So here first was just this post. It's this one here. I simply showed this. Oh, actually, first what I said was, so you don't support the First Amendment? Just putting a fine point on it, guys. Apparently not, because there's no error in that conversation. You're talking about anti-Semitism, not violence. And if it's about violence, then there's a law. But I also pointed out a response to her post that's worth noting. And this response is actually to her post right here. And it says, from Torah Jews, compromising free speech under the banner of fighting anti-Semitism is only helping Israel while exploiting American Jews, says the Orthodox Jewish organization. Silencing protest does not make Jews safer. It fuels resentment and division. In my opinion, which I think is pretty well documented, that's what Zionism does. It manufactures that sentiment. And even in the minds of Jews, they make them feel unsafe when in cases when they're not actually unsafe. It's very clear. I mean, there's plenty of Jewish people and Jewish organizations who have been screaming about this. Jewish students, it goes on, and here's one of them. Jewish students are held accountable for Israel's actions as they are wrongly perceived as extensions of Israel. See? And many of those Jewish students are the ones calling out Israel. It's a very clear Zionist play. And it's this time to call out Israel's ceaseless conflation of Zionism, Judaism with Zionism. Absolutely. Of course, they'll never respond to that because their game is to make it seem like there's only one conversation. But here's somebody responding. And this is just my point about it. So clearly we're talking speech, right? But because she pulled at the last second and made it about violence, this guy thinks, oh, here's a clip of this guy who knows if he's actually somebody supporting Palestine or a Zionist who's out there making it look like he is. You never know. Maybe he's a Palestinian pretending to be a Zionist and carrying out violence. All of that's certainly possible. The point is, it's a contextless video of a guy running up and hitting the guy in the head. Okay. I'm assuming, and oh, there you go. He's got this guy's picture there. My point is, regardless of who and why and how, it's a crime. The guy hit the guy with a board, arrest him. End of point. Right? See, he thinks he's a mic drop showing, well, there's the violence, as if I'm suggesting that that's not. I said, when I say, so you don't support the First Amendment, if you're responding with what about the violence, I think you're brain dead. Did I say violence? Are we talking about anything other than speech? You're the one pulling it into violence to make it okay to censor certain kinds of speech. You're either that easy to play or you're a very dishonest person. But they're going, what about violence? You're okay with violence? I didn't even mention it. There's many of them. This person says, First Amendment doesn't protect violence. Yeah, we agree. And I think they mistyped and said, had you listened carefully, assuming that I didn't, as always, because self-serving assumption is partisan number one, you would have noticed that's what she said. See how stupid this is? Well, I already went through it all. I'll repeat it again. Violence is a crime. She's talking about anti-Semitism. If you want to say an anti-Semitic violent act, yeah, we talk about the same thing. I would just go, well, it would be irrelevant. What caused it? Violence is a crime. See how simple it is? The logic is there. These people either aren't very smart or very dishonest or are bots. That's also a very large part of the conversation. And I'm being very specific and certain about this because there's no air in this conversation, guys. There really isn't. This is a very specific fundamental point. And what I think is hilarious and alarming is the people that are screaming the most about fighting for the Constitution seem to be at least the core part of that circle, not all the conservatives. I think they are uncomfortable with this. They seem to be the ones that are going after it the most. Or rather, let's just make it clear, just as much as the Democrats were going after it, because the point is your government is always doing this. This person says, good. Real education isn't government funded anyway. Propaganda is. Yeah. Well, as Brian said the other day, no school should be federally funded. We agree on that. It doesn't change why it's happening. If you're going to pull the funding, then pull all the funding. If you're going to pull it from some of them and give more to others because they then fall in line, then you're dictating speech through government. It's the same point. And you're doing so because of anti-Semitic. They're not pulling that punch. They're claiming it's because of anti-Semitic actions. That's what they're saying. Or just anti-Semitism, to be specific, as she just said. Either way, unless it's an actual crime, you know the same point. This person says, you do realize that universities have speech codes and codes of conduct. Yep. Were you making a point or did I miss it? See, the problem is that people conflate these things. The lack of education in a lot of this stuff is very alarming to me today. And I think it's very deliberate. There's a reason that you never learn about the Fed, for example, in school, despite being a central part of how this country works. Why is that? Why don't you learn about the Rockefellers and Rothschilds, despite being central players in literally everything that's happened in the last 100 years? You don't even mention them. Or you roll out lists of the most wealthy people in whatever, GQ, and they're never mentioned despite being in that list. The point is there's obvious things that don't get highlighted. Israel and everything, apparently. The point in this, though, is that because of that, people have been drifting away from understanding that you don't get given rights. You have inherent rights and so on. Things like that. In this case, it's about truly understanding what free speech is. To just ask basic, brave, it says, free speech is the right of an individual or community to express information, which I'll add is enshrined in the Constitution as an inherent God-given right to people everywhere, and says information, ideas, and opinions without interference or retaliation from the government. Okay. That's not the college, okay? Unless you want to acknowledge where it seems to be going, different conversation. The point is, clearly you can see there's a difference. Now, I'm not saying it's okay for these colleges to dictate what you can and can't say. That would be them respecting the freedom of ideological thought in a college. Different conversation, though. Nonetheless, we can have these conversations, and people have pushed back, and I too have. And that's why most of these places allow, or at least they used to allow, what they're trying to stop. That's what's so insane about this argument, guys, is right now, the whole point is about allowing freedom of thought and ideology. And what they're trying to do is shut it down to the guys that they are the ones doing that. It is just, it's schizophrenic to me. Again, all of it's nonsense, because the bottom line is they're shutting down your ability to say things that they claim are anti-Semitic. Regardless of even if it is, it's still a censorship. It's a violation of your free speech. Now, here's on March 7th, Ben Shapiro, or actually, let me take it. I think that's actually older. Oh, yeah, it's right here from April 2024. Decentered News put this out on the 7th. It's a clip of Ben Shapiro breaking down the anti-Semitic actions of these protests. And don't forget, it's very roundly proven. Jewish Voices for Peace, and I think it was Jewish Voices of America. I forget the first one he said. They're both, but the reason, those are both the two groups we've referenced before, and largely are the ones responsible. I think it was Jewish Voices for Peace in Colombia that put these on. And that's why what he does here is important, as he counterbalances it with the fact that it was not what they said. I mean, and there were people wandering around with their cameras. The only times you saw these inflection points were when you had these Zionist marches that were constantly trying to create violence. That's my own perception. I'm sure there's examples that you could find of Palestinians who were out there trying to do the same. Because I believe that. I think that's how this always goes. My point, though, is in a large, high elevation view, you can look and see all of the big button points they made. Almost all have been shown to be false, misrepresented, outrage, or just Palestinian protests being called anti-Semitism. Over and over, the flag in the eye, the marching, they'll kill all the Jews. In Congress, that cop said, Stefanik, you're wrong about that. That didn't happen. I investigated, and she still cites it to this day. That's what we're dealing with. So here is Ben trying to make this out to be, for obvious reasons, what it's not. And here is the contrast of people who were there. Jewish people who were there in a peaceful circle, sharing with Muslims and Christians and calling for peace in Palestine.
Authorities are arresting some people across the country, but certainly not enough. Flag burning, pro-Hamas,
which is protected under the Constitution, but he doesn't care about the Constitution.
Pro-Hezbollah, anti-Western radicals taking over these campuses.
Come have some matzah, come have some matzo ball soup. We're having a great time. We got plenty to go for everyone. And we'll be out here having a really lovely holiday.
As Passover week begins, a group of Jewish and non-Jewish protesters have gathered at the university to celebrate.
There is nowhere else I should be for Passover besides here on campus.
If you are shouting about the Yehud, that's a pretty good indicator that anti-Semitism is being engaged in.
Passover is the story of...
And just to be clear, by the way, in this group, as we covered on the show, as the one speaking is a Jewish man, there's other Jewish people there, but it's an intermixing of Muslims and Christians and people wearing kippahs who are all singing along because showing of respect. Now, yes, you can find other groups that weren't. My point is, this is central location at Columbia University. To pretend that this was some hotbed of racism and is a simple lie and has been roundly shown to be a lie. People like this don't care. Guess what? Because they're dishonest.
Our escape from slavery in the land of Egypt. And I think we need to recognize that on Passover, it's important to stand up for oppressed people everywhere, whether they're Jewish or not. I had seen
that's what never again actually means.
so many statements online about how Jews weren't safe, about how Columbia had turned into a hotbed of anti-Semitism. Each of those statements further galvanized me to use my voice and my privilege as a Jewish person to come here and have a Seder with all of these lovely people.
Again, an environment of anti-Semitism has clearly been created on campuses like Columbia University.
And see, that's why he showed that. That is why. Because Ben Shapiro, I mean, deliberately, dishonestly conflates Zionism with Judaism. And, you know, any honest Jew out there will very clearly tell you whether they believe in what Zionism is or not. They're not the same thing. That's just a dishonest argument. You can argue, I think still dishonestly, that Zionism is about the homeland for the Jewish people. For sure. If you believe that, I don't know. I feel bad for you because it's very easy to prove that's not true. My point is that even if that's true, there's a lot of Jewish people in the world that do not identify with Zionism. So for you to then claim that that's the only one, that then you are the one being anti-Semitic, that, or rather what term would actually represent you being anti-Jewish person, because Semite is not the same thing. The point, though, is that's why it's important. Ben Shapiro would say anti-Zionist is anti-Semitism. He is part of the problem. These people are Jewish people. You could see it right there. These are Jewish people that are anti-Zionist, and he's calling them racist. He's calling them trash because that's the kind of person he is.
There were also many non-Jewish students who joined the Seder, and we're a little bit hesitant about whether they should eat matzah or not. We told them it was okay, you can try some matzah. It was really a beautiful thing to see in the middle of the pro-Palestinian encampment.
You're talking about tens of thousands of students all across the country who are engaged in pro-Hamas rallies, waving Hezbollah and Hamas flags.
Nope. The vast majority were very clearly waving Palestinian flags and promoting Palestinian freedom. Now, you could do all your best to conflate that into whatever you want it to mean, even if you actually does mean that in some cases. It's not what he just said. You think he doesn't know that? You think he didn't research this and very easily look at the crowd and show? No, because they're saying Palestinian flags are Hamas flags, which show you that we've always been right, that they think they're all the same thing, which is why a genocide is clearly happening. One of the many endless amounts of reasons. I mean, this is my opinion, but you have to understand with what you know and look at what he's saying. This is a villain, guys. This is a deliberate act to continue the murder of an entire people based on what I can prove to you are lies he knows are lies. Now, you could, at best, the only leeway you could give him is that he somehow believes these lies are in the interest of some outcome at the end, and positive good. That's a big assumption. That's like assuming that's what Trump and Elon are going to do for you. Same conversation. But the point is, with what's happening on the ground, with the proof, with the evidence we're presenting, he knows this, guys. It just makes me sick. These people exist.
I'm part of a really proud legacy of progressive Jewish activists who have participated in things like the civil rights movement or the anti-apartheid movement in the 80s, where it's so important to us to transcend the barriers of race, class, ethnicity, religion. And that's what's happening here today. And there's a lot of joy here, I think, really for the first time on campus in months.
These screaming teenagers from intimidating Jewish students on campus and waving Hamas flags.
If you were to believe American politicians and American mainstream media, you would think that this campus is a really dangerous environment now, rife with anti-Semitic violence. And here we are in the heart of the Gaza Solidarity encampment. And right behind me is a teach-in going on about anti-Semitism, about the history of anti-Semitism, the nature of anti-Semitism, how we confront it as part of protests and social justice movements. So I keep telling people, you know, as a Jewish person and as a person of conscience, I wouldn't be associating with this protest movement if I thought that anyone here harbored or espoused prejudice of any kind.
God, it's just absolutely unreal how easy it is to just forcefully lie about something and have enough momentum and social media control to just roll over the top of what's actually going on. It's happening every day right now. To me, this is at the, like, let's put it this way. You could make the argument that decensored news is just taking the most benign clips and in comparison to what Ben is saying. That's not inaccurate. It's not unfair. You don't know for sure, right? Unless you went and did your due diligence, but you should. The point is, regardless of whether there's a group right across the street that's screaming, he is in the center of the main encampment of what they called a hot spot of anti-Semitism. Ben himself. And we've shown you 3 or 4 different Jewish people, crowds singing, having anti-Semitism teach-ins in the middle. There's no question he's misrepresenting this. Now, is it also possible that there's partly a bad part of this that wasn't shown? Of course that's possible. Look into it for yourself. I'd like to believe that if you truly continue to look into it, you'd end up finding out that at worst, you'll find people who are screaming things that they feel are justified because they're angry about Israel, but you could also call it racist, but very, very few and far between. 2 things, because one, it's actually not as prevalent they make it out to be, but also because most of them, even if they feel that way, which is sort of a counterintuitive point, to be honest, but it's accurate, wouldn't say it out loud because they know that people like Ben would make it look, think about it. So you can stand back and see that they're just choosing, probably because they decide that they somehow wink, wink, know that they hate Jews because Ben's been so brainwashed, but I don't believe that. I think he's the one doing the brainwashing. Either way, it's clear that he's lying about what happened. So again, the bigger point here is that they're using Israeli spy tech to spy on these people, American or otherwise, just like they spied on Americans when Trump's last administration was in because of red hats. And it's not about, I think here's a good point to overlap it with. The same way they use woke politics and DEI, or they had at the part when it was necessary to cover their regime change tactics using USAID that's now being dismantled to pretend they're fighting that, right? It's the same thing here, that they use Israeli government propaganda uses whatever the moment is. So back then, and again, the point is about all of us spying, controlling, dictating, infiltrating what's going on in this country. So during the Trump's last administration, when it was about the red hats and the trucker convoys and the January 6th, well, what'd they do? They infiltrated and they highlighted that, so the Democrats allowed it. They took whatever they could get, whatever tool that was offered to go after all those bad guys in red hats, and then it spun back around, like Corbett said in the beginning. And now you got the same people who were highlighted turning back around and going, now use it against them. Give me that NSO group. Go after those evil Democrats. And what does Israel get? The whole picture.
Burn American flags and fly Hamas flags and shout from the river to the sea, Palestine, it shall be free. And shout about the killing of Jews.
It's not a...
Nope. See how he quickly, that's not true. Here's what's interesting. I've only seen 2 or 3 of them. And in every single one of the clips where you see somebody saying something like, even like we are Hamas, which I would clearly argue that there are some people in this that feel that way. There's even a valid argument to be made why they might feel that way. I'm of the mind, because of the evidence of Israel funding them, that it's not an easy thing to say, but they're nonetheless still have a protected active armed resistance. Those both exist. But the point is, wait, real quick, what do you say?
From the river to the sea, Palestine, it shall be free. And shout about the killing.
Oh, yeah, right. So the point being that the videos like that, where you can find even saying, like I said, with Hamas, or somebody out there going, yeah, it's all because of the Jews, you're going to find that it's either like one random guy with a poorly wrapped kippah standing by himself when no one else is with him, or a group of people that seem mysteriously not part of everything, that are all in black masks and everything else. Now, that doesn't mean that it very well still could be part of that. The point to be objective about this, it's almost impossible that doesn't exist. You're going to find a racist person, you're going to find a thief, you're going to find in any group of people you'll find out there. It's just statistics. You're going to find somebody out there that doesn't care, it's abusing this. Evidence shows that's not the majority. And in large points, you can see that they're using those to make it look like everybody else is doing that, when what you're seeing here is what you'll find most. The measured care, the protest for the end of war, while Ben is calling them racist and cheering on genocide of Jews.
It's not a new allegation to say that criticism of the state of Israel, or really any speech about Israel-Palestine that Israeli nationalists don't like, is somehow anti-Semitic. People like to say that our campus has some kind of anti-Semitism problem, and I've really seen no evidence of that. I think what we have is a situation where some people have a free speech problem with Columbia University, with universities in general. Some people have a criticism of Israel problem with the youth movement in this country.
Now think about this in the context of the left-right paradigm. You know how easy it was, again, just like James was saying, to set this up, from one to the other administration, where you create I can't even think of a bad word. What the woke dynamic of DEI and what they were doing, it's ridiculous. You created a situation where they were so ready to go after how bad it all was, to where they ultimately then go along with censorship because you're fighting that bad group. I mean, it's really the same argument as saying that we're going to basically suspend or do things that are unconstitutional to save the Constitution. Like, you damn well better be certain about that, seeing as how that is, even if they're right, maybe somebody stops before it happens, but we should never be okay with that. That is, it's an oxymoron. It is counterintuitive. Even if you succeed, like Catherine's been pointing out, you're cementing a problem that never goes away, that's allowable, and it never should be. So I'm going to go ahead and pause there, because we're already long for what I wanted to get into today. I want to spend the rest of the time talking about the larger direct point about AI government. But overall, guys, I mean, there's example. I have other clips that we could show that I include here from the actually, I'll just play a really quick opening part of that, since you guys have seen this before. God, what's going on with this platform today? There we go. And this is important, because these are the kind of people, without actually highlighting it, that Ben Shapiro is calling trash.
A Holocaust survivor, my message to the brave student protesters in America is just keep doing it. Don't give up. We are doing exactly the same. And in the long term, we are going to prevail. I'm out from the beginning at every march.
Now, he went there with other Holocaust survivors. Now, this is an older clip that I played, and I shared that Jewish doctor talking about exclusively killing children by the IDF. And they also shared the Avi Shalom clip of him telling you Zionism is not Judaism and it's racism. But what's funny about this is this guy says another non-Jew dictating to us real Jews what Judaism, Zionism is. And he made my point exactly. Right. So this is a Jewish person literally telling you what he's calling him not Jewish because he says something bad about Judaism. I simply highlighted this guy or the rest of them are Jewish people. He's a Holocaust survivor. This wasn't the wrong one. There's another one. Let's see. Let me go back. Oh, well, it doesn't matter. The point was in one of these, and this is usually what happens. It's kind of a mic drop, is these people usually refuse to call out the Holocaust survivor, which rightly so. It's insane. The point is, you point out this person is there, and it shows you that it's more of a shtick, like they're trying to manipulate people using this idea. Either way, the overarching point, as usual, is that this is happening. They're lying about what's really going on to suppress speech, and right now your government is spearheading that, and too many people in the partisan field are allowing it. Now, all of this is going to intersect with the next conversation, which is about how this leads to not just hiding our dissent of what they're building, but also the infiltration through that. Which is, it's all part of it. Not just the information sphere, but the technological aspect, the artificial intelligence aspect, the military aspect. These things are all being slowly, if not rapidly, overtaken, in my opinion. Daniel McAdams highlights this in regard to another government entity. The Israeli lobby is trying to cancel Pentagon Deputy Press Secretary Kingsley Wilson because she said Israel should fight its own wars. Pentagon Press Secretary Kingsley Wilson is a prolific purveyor of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, says the Jewish Insider. And you could read it. She repeatedly opposed sending U.S. military aid to Israel during its war. She wrote, Israel can fight its own wars. Think about calling that anti-Semitic. That's the point. They've used anti-Semitic to go after anything that's a criticism of Israel policy, which is its own example. And Daniel McAdams says, if saying Israel can fund its own wars is how low the bar is for being excluded from any job in politics, that America really is bought and paid for by a foreign lobby. Remember when that used to be, I mean, what's his name called me a white supremacist for literally talking about this at a time like months ago. And now I'm seeing even him somewhat highlight some of these points. It just shows you how, it is never easy to jump out and call something out when no one else is talking about it. And we will always be the one to do it if we believe it's right. We'll always do that for you guys. But I will step out when I know I'm going to get hit flack from everybody. Even the independent media from both sides. It's always what happens. Because it's true. It's accurate. Not because of racism or so. It's about the facts that we can lay out for you. So he goes on to say, I don't really think this is the win that the Israel lobby thinks it is. Every time they pull this crap, thousands of people wake up. Now, I agree with that. I think it's because they're losing control of the narrative, which is why many of the reasons, this is one of the primary reasons, I think, why this is being rolled out so rapidly. Once we enter into this technocratic controlled AI, influenced reality, this stuff won't matter anymore. And that's not my opinion. I mean, there's 1,000 things that have been written about this that I'll get to it specifically in the article from Conversation about what this kind of the amount of data that they're scooping up right now and what that can effectively do goes so far beyond privacy. It's I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. It really is it's a concerning. Even that doesn't do it. It's terrifying, I guess. It's the reality of where this goes is something that we can see happening, that the evidence is showing, and people don't want to acknowledge it. I mean, what else is that? But in the conversation of shutting down speech on campuses, what's embarrassing is Vice President J.D. Vance III says shutting down free speech will destroy our civilization. You see, this is the game they play. Elon Musk shares a tweet or a meme that makes an argument about the opposite of what he's doing, and then people ignore that he's doing it. It's like it's just lazy reverse psychology. But it's not new. I mean, he's just coming out and going, the thing that we're doing is bad. And they go, well, he's saying it's bad, so that must not be what they're doing. Very simple. The bottom line is they're obviously censoring, and he said, or rather shutting down free speech. And Arnaud Bertrand says the very same day that they announced illegal protests in college and universities would be met with imprisonment or deportation. I mean, it writes itself. It's insane. See, I would get these words stuck in my head, and that fits. But it's funny how these words just get stuck in my head and I can't get past. But so I'll include this for you, by the way, before we continue. The free speech part of this is important. Consistency matters. Now, I've never made the argument that any one of these alone, therefore, proves forever what the point is. But if you can't see by now the consistency from 2016 to the recent one about the flag burning, to the Israel should control Congress, to the idea that we're going to go after criticism of Israel, this is consistently anti-free speech from Donald Trump. Consistently, as far back as you want to look, as far as I can tell. You could disagree with that, but I don't know how, when you listen to what they're saying, other than you somehow deciding that shutting down the internet without allowing that, what he says, I'll let him say it for himself, is calling you stupid for thinking free speech matters, or that burning a flag of any kind, American or otherwise, is protected as an act of free speech roundly by the Supreme Court, as Ron Paul and others have roundly defended, because it is protected under your rights. And he's telling you you're stupid for thinking that, or what we're talking about today. Roundly. Now, here are some of the clips I think are important to hear.
Took the American flag down. They were writing Hamas on the bell outside of Union Station. What does an American flag
unverified, by the way.
Down? They were writing Hamas on the bell outside of Union Station.
Someone did, for sure.
What does a Donald Trump do if he takes office to these people on the street?
Rarely have we seen anything like this, and I think you should get a 1 year.
Except it happens all the time.
Year jail sentence if you do anything to desecrate the American flag. Now, people will say, oh, it's unconstitutional. Those are stupid people.
I don't know how anybody's not shocked by that. Now, just to be clear, it's the same as the free speech point. Like, I think Ryan Grimm made a really great, just very clear statement. Like, this is unequivocal that what they're doing on the campuses it's just, there's no air in the conversation. This is the same thing. Now, we can have a discussion about whether this should be the case. I'm sure people would have very well-articulated points about why we shouldn't allow it. The point, though, is that it has been roundly upheld more than once because it is, by the way, it's something they can't tell you're not allowed to burn something that you own. The point is, though, because that becomes like a statist authoritarian thing, but either way, about respect or not, which I argue it's disrespectful. I agree with that. The point, though, is that it is and has been roundly shown protected under your constitutional rights. And for him to say that you're stupid means that he doesn't care about that, or that he doesn't know, so which would mean he was stupid. Either way you look at it, he's wrong. Or so he's either hiding that by attacking you for calling the right thing out, or he doesn't even know it himself. Either way, he's wrong. I mean, Ron Paul and plenty of other examples, proud, like them leaning into Ron Paul while on saying, it's embarrassing. They're using these people. That is unconstitutional, and he wants to put you in jail for doing something that has been roundly, rather it's unconstitutional to put you in jail for it. This is constitutionally protected action, roundly seen as such, and he's going after you for it. Here is the one from 2016, making the same argument, consistency.
Because we're losing a lot of people because of the internet, and we have to do something. We have to go see Bill Gates and a lot of different people that really understand what's happening. We have to talk to them, maybe in certain areas, closing that internet up in some way. Somebody will say, oh, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. These are foolish people.
I just don't know how you miss stuff like that. Look, even if you want to argue that you're incorrect, to call you stupid or foolish for caring about free speech when what they're doing is obviously connected, it's insulting. And it shows you that these people don't really care about what they're claiming they fight for. Right? But here's one that you should remember, and it's in this same one. It's right here, right? Because what we're going to show you is that this is obvious, guys. You can't miss what's going on. So not only did Pam Bondi step out and organize a task force to prosecute October 7th crimes? Explain for me exactly why a U.S. entity would be prosecuting crimes committed by somebody outside this country. And as far as I can tell, there's not Americans involved that were doing this, were there? Are there American members of Hamas? If so, no one's told me. I just don't know. There's no way you could argue this makes sense. America first, please. Okay. Secondarily, another one comes out on the 5th. Attorney General Pam Bondi has opened an investigation into anti-Semitism in California because that's what their focus is. Not all the things they screamed about and all the things they feigned to do. They're immediately acting for here's money, Israel. Here's your ongoing genocide. We're going to fight for you, fighting for October 7th. We're going to fight against anti-Semitism. We're going to attack Americans' free speech. What about the Epstein files? Yeah, I don't think you're going to get that anytime soon. Seeing as how Trump very clearly many times is overlapped with this group, as well as wishing Ghislaine Maxwell, wish her well, frankly. Before that, though, here is what he said, in case you missed it for the 100th time, in a radio show about Israel controlling Congress. Now, this needs to matter for you with what's currently happening, as well as how this artificial intelligence infiltration overlap will play out, knowing that this is how he feels. as well as, again, the other 11 different clips of him openly telling you that he's going to censor American speech for Israel.
You know, the biggest change I've seen in Congress is Israel literally owned Congress. You understand that 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And it was so powerful. It was so powerful. And I think you know exactly what I'm saying. They had such power. Israel had such power, and rightfully, over Congress.
Yeah, that's crazy. So, all this happening, you may wonder why we're not getting the Epstein files, aside from the very obvious that just even need to be mentioned. It's possibly just because they're all interconnected to this. And I'm very much of the mind that all of them are. Like, the joke made by anybody who's not, at least even if they're partisan, who's objective and has a brain, is that the only reason you would claim national security for what's going on here is because there's judges and politicians and people that are tied to this, which is exactly what this was about. And if that's the case, there's only one way to look at that. Either they're covering for all the Democrats you think that only is a party to, or I guess there's three things. Either they're covering for all the Democrats, or I guess there's only two, or they're covering for Republicans that are on that list. And either way, I haven't seen any Democrats. My point is, as you know, is that it's just the government, guys. This left-right paradigm is an illusion to keep you thinking you're winning every 4 years. The reality is that your government is influenced by this. We can see that in Trump's administration and Biden's administration. Here's what he had to say about Ghislaine Maxwell.
Question. It's a little bit a different topic, but it's one that a lot of people are talking about. Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison, and a lot of people want to know if she's going to turn in powerful people. And I know you've talked in the past about Prince Andrew, and you've criticized Bill Clinton's behavior. I'm wondering, do you feel that she's going to turn in powerful men? How do you see that working out?
I don't know. I haven't really been following it too much. I just wish her well, frankly. I've met her numerous times over the years, especially since I lived in Palm Beach, and I guess they lived in Palm Beach.
Can you not recognize how dishonest that just was? This is what people choose not to see. This is deliberate, like clumsy dishonesty. Now, you could argue it's just because he just doesn't want there to be any scene connection, whether or not he actually did any crimes on Epstein Island. That's also possible, right? That he's associated with them and never actually did anything wrong, but doesn't want that to be taken out of context. Like, that seems like a possible point. I argue that it seems more likely that they were involved like everybody else. But the point is, either way, he's trying to hide something. And it could just be that he doesn't want you to know that he went there. But listen to this again.
Powerful people, and I know you've talked in the past about Prince Andrew, and you've criticized Bill Clinton's behavior. I'm wondering, do you feel that she's going to turn in powerful men? How do you see that working out?
I don't know. I haven't really been following it too much. I just wish her well.
Obviously, like I said before, I believe that that's impossible. I think he knows well, because he knows him and has been pictured with him like 8 times, that he's following it. I think that's obvious, but this is the most important part.
Frankly, I've met her numerous times over the years.
Okay, he's met her numerous times over the years. And he says, especially since I lived in Palm Beach. So pointing back, I met her many times because I lived in Palm Beach. The only way to take that, what it means is because they live there, right? Especially since I lived there, where they also live. For him to then follow that up by saying, as if he didn't know, I guess they apparently do live there too. It literally contradicts what he just said. The only reason you would say, especially since I live there, is because you know that they live there, and that's why you bumped into them while you live there. To act like right now you find out they live there is just it doesn't show much intelligence. Like, you can't recognize that contradicts what you just said.
Powerful men, how do you see that working out?
I don't know. I haven't really been following it too much. I just wish her well, frankly. I've met her numerous times over the years, especially since I lived in Palm Beach, and I guess they lived in Palm Beach.
Oh, you guess. Are you uncertain? Seeing as how you lived there alongside them and saw them many times because they lived there, but now you guess they live there? It's a small point, but my God, how people can't see through the clumsy way he talks, the way he sidesteps things, gives you no nonsensical point that people assume at. I mean, I guess, maybe he's smarter than I think, and it's working for him, apparently. Seems crazy.
But I wish her well, whatever it is. I don't know the situation with Prince Andrew. Just don't know. Not aware of it.
I mean, it's just lie after lie after lie, guys. You can look back and prove he's lying, by the way. But, yeah, I'm sure it'll all come out in time. But here is the next part I want to talk about. Now, we're getting into this for main reason about calling this stuff out, especially when it comes to DOGE and what they're doing, is just the new conspiracy theory, right? Oh, you're black-pilled. It's lazy, and it's just a way to disregard information, especially since we're fundamentally the opposite of that. But a great conversation with some really good people in the conversation by James Corbett. And it's called James Corbett and Friends Deliver the White Pill. And basically, he asked us all to kind of break down our opinions about this. And, I'm a slightly different opinion of certain things around this, but it's important to watch because the real point is what we're always talking about. There's a lot of people out here who are trying to highlight the fact that you are the only one that's truly going to save you. You are your own solution. That you need to or even just calling out things that we can prove are problems and get called black pill because we're not hoping for the best. Like the reality is you've been turned into thinking the white pill is ultimately the black pill. Right? You and inverted, thinking that by you going, well, it's the best we're going to get is somehow not obviously giving up. But it's a good conversation, even though it's been done to death in the current like partisan post-Trump discussion. What we do in here is really break down some points that I think are very relevant. And thank you, James, yet again for continuing to have your finger on the pulse of this. But what he highlights in here, and I just want to include that because we discussed it, is something he mentions that really stands out to me. He makes a point about what's called algocracy, government by algorithm. And as always, James Corbett ahead of the curve. I didn't know about this word, and I looked it up, and it's very interesting because I believe this is where we are. Not just where we're going, where we are, which I don't even think is that hard to recognize. And that doesn't have to mean artificial intelligence unless you just want to kind of, today that term has become so broad, whether we're talking about like a sentient general intelligence or, it's kind of muddled today. My opinion is that an algorithm is just, it's just code, which is accurate. And artificial intelligence is something different. But either way, the point is this is a step in that direction. And my point is that right now we are using computer programs or code to ultimately decide, which is not that contentious, right? Outcomes. Use it to decide what's the most logical path. The question becomes, are we at a point where that is deciding what happens? Whether it's because of somebody who is guiding us with a program or because that program has been decided, or maybe it is because it's artificial intelligence and that's guiding our actions. This is a real thing. What level I just discussed, that's where we have to decide. I think we're at a point where what's happening under Elon Musk and DOGE and Trump is in earnest, the real rollout that we weren't supposed to know about until later when they introduce you to what's been going on for 10 years. They're testing AI government. Now, I recently had a great interview with Charlie Robinson about a lot of things. And one that came up was about, and I wrote AI governance and I didn't change it. I think it technically applies, but when you look up AI governance, I guess the actual definition more so applies to the governance of the AI system, as opposed to what I meant was more so artificial intelligence government. But both are in the same wheelhouse. But I think more specifically, I titled today AI government. But the great conversation. Charlie and I are going to be connecting on a regular basis because I love our conversations. It's always, we have different opinions on plenty of things and different kind of like, the point is, I think we always have a what's the right word? I always forget the word. When we discuss things and we kind of come to some new ideas together. And I always enjoy them. So we're going to be connecting at the birthday party carnival while we're there. We're going to do a little mini podcast together because it's right about the same time. But I look forward to that. But the point was, in this, we discussed some interesting things. Blockchain being presented as sort of like the solution to all problems from the inner circle of Donald Trump, which is not surprising to me. But even we didn't get into it more. I forgot to make the follow back up on the point. But I said in the show that I could make an argument for why there's a positive side to that. But just to be clear on that, right now, whether or not I see ways that it could be used to benefit us, I'm very, very worried or resistant to it being done because I'm right now, I think is the way it's going. It's like suggesting that there's positive outcomes to anything that are still being used against us, like Neuralink, for example, right? It worries me how that's being used. But my point was simply that, like I've said a long time ago, that blockchain technically, if it's used and not like this, it gets into the overlap of like the whether Bitcoin's the chain is the accurate one, and whether there's already 51% CPU power that can manipulate that. Like I think we've been driven in a way where it can be manipulated, which is why it's being used as a strategic reserve, as opposed to something that undermines the financial system, which is the way it was designed. So my point is that overall, we can see that blockchain, if used on a system that is actually accountable, could be possibly used by the masses to keep the government accurate. as opposed to the reverse. Today, it's being built in a way that's being used by them for us, it's just, we're being manipulated, in my opinion. And I think it's very obvious under the guise of more transparency, on efficiency, and so on. Watch this for that conversation. We get into it. It's very interesting. Oh, and I want to point this out. As I was getting started, Tim Hinckliffe posted this. And I didn't have the time to grab it because I was just about to go live. But remember, we talked about the executive order of DOGE, which all it really did was, actually, that might be the way to find it. Hold on. Digital services. No, it's not popping up. This is just the article that came up. But yeah, it says Trump's second inauguration, the United States digital services, now DOGE. Oh, maybe they have it right here. Oh, here it is. Nice. That got us there. All right. So here's what I'll include this for the show notes. It'll be at the bottom. And this is the executive order. So now I'll read it from his comments, but it's all right here. Establishing and implementing the president's Department of Government Efficiency. Don't forget, all they really did was rename the Obama U.S. digital services. So more digital ID, more digital control. It's the same. It's exactly what it looks like. Now that using this kind of weird way they did this and pretending he's just an advisor, they made sure that nobody could be accountable for anything. Like there's just no oversight on anything. It is deliberate, especially with all that we can see, the Israel influence, if not control. I mean, how do we not ask that question about what's not being seen? Why don't we get that transparency from the most transparent administration? It is schizophrenic. But so what he said, don't forget, the executive order establishes the Department of Government Efficiency to implement the president's DOGE agenda by modernizing federal technology and software to maximize government efficiency. Efficiency movement being the precursor to technocracy movement. Maybe it's a coincidence. I don't think so. And also his point is that they're using technology, AI. The USDS administrator shall commence, with USDS being digital services or DOGE, what they changed it to, commence a software modernization initiative to improve the quality and efficiency of government-wide software, network infrastructure, and IT systems. And his point, New World Order, Great Reset, Fourth Industrial Revolution, Intelligent Age. Like these are the steps that we all saw coming. And just because this is being rolled out by people that you think are on your side, people are pulling their punches. Just so you can see it. Commence a software modernization. So thank you, Tim, for pointing this out. It's important to know that this is what they told you it would be. Now, the DOGE administrator is an interesting point in all this. I just want to passingly highlight this, that this is what got me thinking about this mostly, is that ultimately we have a situation where we're being told that somebody else is in charge. And the only reason I think they're doing this little tap dance deception is because ultimately it was because Elon Musk is the one making decisions. That is illegal as an advisor, or rather not illegal, but the one having authority and carrying out action. Understanding the reality, an advisor is advising somebody with authority, whether Trump or whoever's actually in the position, who they claim is Amy Gleason, who's actually somebody from a previous administration who worked as sort of a second tier underling, or if not one of the top people at the previous digital services. Now they changed DOGE, and apparently she's back as the administrator. But I mean, I can't even verify that she's even actually doing this, other than the fact that her LinkedIn says that she did back in the last administration for digital services. I haven't even seen that. It's very weird. And remember that they refused to say her name. Kaylee Leavitt wouldn't say it, as well as the fact that they're not one to tell you the names of people that work there. And then in a court document, it comes out that it's not Elon Musk, even though Trump says he's in charge in front of Congress, which might create a legal problem for him. So my point was, well, how does this make sense? How does all this line up? Do they just want us to be jumping at shadows? Possibly. Or is it something else? Is it that this is not even Elon? Is it that they're actually rolling out some kind of artificial government governance situation? And that this is the way they keep it opaque, so we don't really recognize that. It's just a complete hypothetical conversation. Now, what's not hypothetical is the coming conversation, if not action, of using AI for government. Now, just whether they're doing it now through DOGE is a separate conversation of whether it is coming, and they're talking about it. So those things are overlapping, because I can prove to you that through this administration, they are rolling out AI systems for the government. So it's one step removed. I'm just simply wanting you to ask whether this is already what they're doing with this literal artificial intelligence, or piloting that like they're doing in Gaza with Palantir and Lavender and Habsora, or like they're doing in Honduras with the Palantir overlapped, what's it called now? I'm blanking on it. Prospera. It's a supposedly freedom city with teal investment that is a technocratic nightmare. Or just Gaza itself, for that matter, that's being run by artificial intelligence control. Or, these are not, this has been going on a long time. So I just want to highlight that. Here is her actual LinkedIn. If you want to look forward, it still says digital services, which is strange. I mean, wouldn't she have updated that right now if she's the administrator of one of the most talked about things in this country? Sure seems strange to me, doesn't it? But then you can go down and it simply down here, it says 25 to present, United States digital service. Okay, why does it still say digital service if it says 25 to present? Anybody confused about that? And it only says senior advisor. Isn't that interesting? So there's only one of two things happening here. Either Elon Musk is in charge, and that's technically illegal because he's only an advisor, or, and that's how they're avoiding him having to show accountability or divest for his companies, even though it's quite obvious that he's in charge, and Trump even said that publicly. And as she literally lists herself as an advisor when she's supposed to be the administrator. It just, guys, nobody would feel good about any of this. If your only excuse is because they have to hide things from the Democrats, then you're lost. You are blindly accepting whatever they tell you because you hate whatever they painted for you, even if it's accurate. I mean, it's incredible that people can be played like this. This is concerning to me. Now, here is the article. Who is Amy Gleason? The person named DOGE's acting administrator by the White House. Here's what it says. The White House on Tuesday afternoon identified Amy Gleason as the acting leader of DOGE, which has been pushing agencies to fire employees, cancel contracts, and make other cuts. So if that's the case, why would she have that name, and why would it be 25 to present, and why would she not be publicly speaking? Like, I'm starting to wonder if Amy Gleason is even a real thing. And I'm kind of being facetious in a way, but it's like, what is this? It says, although DOGE's cuts have been championed by Elon Musk and his associates, the White House has insisted that Musk is overseeing the effort as a senior advisor, not an employee. That's how they sidestep the accountability. The identity of who is technically running DOGE, they claim, has been a mystery from the most transparent administration, from the most transparent part of the government, we're being told repeatedly. Even though an executive order signed by Trump last month called for the appointment of an administrator to report to the White House. A government lawyer on Monday told a judge that he didn't know who was that person, and the White House press secretary, Carrie Leavitt, had declined to identify who it was in the middle of a press briefing. Somebody told her not to, whether to cause ruckus or because there was some undecision, not clear what they wanted to say just yet. There are career officials, it says, and there are political appointees who are helping run DOGE on a day-to-day basis, she said. Gleason, 53, worked from 2018 to 2021. So to be clear, into Biden's administration under the Digital Services, an agency that has been renamed to DOGE according to her LinkedIn profile, even though that's not what her LinkedIn profile says. So why would Associated Press say that? Her LinkedIn profile, I just showed you. See what I'm saying? So there's some kind of coordinated effort here to make this seem like something it's not. It's even the small details. And it goes on to say, according to a profile, in that role, under both Trump and Biden, she worked with the White House on the federal response to the coronavirus pandemic. In the interim, she had been working as the chief product officer at two small Nashville-based healthcare startups. Interesting. Russell Street Ventures and Main Street Health. Both companies were founded by healthcare entrepreneur Brad Smith, who worked in the first Trump administration in several key healthcare roles. Russell Street Ventures' website has recently been deleted, but the company has called itself an innovative healthcare firm focused on launching and scaling companies that serve some of the nation's most vulnerable and underserved patient populations. Interesting. Well, in case you want to look further, I'm not going to focus on it now. Here's a post from Tennessee entrepreneur Brad Smith launching Russell Street Ventures. The website is now deleted. Here is this is the Crunchbase showing you who worked alongside them. There's nothing bombshell. There's Gleason right there, chief product officer. Just thought it was interesting. Here's one of the things that stood out. At the White House, Brad helped operationalize various elements of the federal response to COVID-19. Interesting overlap to all of this. Testing across the country. My point is, I think what was happening there was a combination of experiments, and one of them was data collection. As you can see, Oracle using with Larry Ellison and Stargate, they're using that data for the new rollout of the injection. So they claim, probably for everything else too. And it says launching Project Airbridge, which shipped billions of medical supplies from around the world to America. You know, things that we now know hurt us, like masks and ventilators. But it says Brad also served as the board of a board member of Operation Warp Speed, helping develop COVID vaccines in record time, guys. So this guy starts a company where she is leading a product development and then deletes. I mean, there's something strange in all of this. Now, like I said, this is just supplementary information. Decide for yourself. At HHS, Brad launched innovative payment models that lowered the price of prescription drugs and allowed rural communities to transform how healthcare is delivered. You get the sense there might be some kind of artificial intelligence part in all that. Now it says Brad graduated summa cum laude from Harvard University and received an MPhil from Oxford University, where he was a Rhodes Scholar, which, you know, might be relevant to somebody. Oh, and here's the website. It was deleted, but here's the Wayback Machine in case you want to look into it. So my point is about Amy Gleason and this kind of opaque situation of who's actually calling the shots. So let's just consider the fact that it might be a combination or entirely something like a program. So this is from G0 saying Elon Musk's government takeover is powered by artificial intelligence. Musk isn't just seizing control of the executive branch. He's using artificial intelligence as his weapon of choice. Now, that's obviously what they're framing. Think of it. Think for yourself. Don't consider only partisan ideas of whether he's taken over the presidency and act like that's some Democrat response. It may be the reality, maybe not. Consider all the points. The point is, what we do know is that he's seizing a lot of power in ways that make a lot of people uncomfortable, who in many cases are not, it's not about the people, when I say that, to be clear, I'm not talking about other government officials. I'm talking about people that care about consolidation of power, who care about independence, liberty, constitutional rights. But on top of that, there's also a lot of people that I think are concerned about the shifting of power and the way it goes in the world. But it's weird that we can see very specific entities that don't really have a problem with it. But it says, at the Education Department, DOGE representatives have reportedly fed sensitive data, including personally identifiable student loan information, into artificial intelligence software through Microsoft's Azure cloud service. Of course. So this is clearly happening, that they're using AI data, which we've already talked about, or data from your information in the government databases to train their models. Now, the fact that they're using Microsoft's Azure cloud service just makes it that much more ridiculous, especially since Microsoft has a significant connection to Unit 8200, an Israeli military intelligence unit. LinkedIn data shows that at least 166 former, which we know that's not how this works, Unit 8200 members are currently employed at Microsoft, indicating a strong recruitment pipeline from that one unit into Microsoft. That's like saying CIA pipeline, or saying no, they're all retired CIA agents. Would you be okay with that? That's outrageous. So just that alone is enough. Overall, it's not just Google, it's not just Microsoft, but Google, Facebook, Microsoft. You get in the bigger picture. Former Israeli spies in every field are working to the top of these situations. And it's public information. Or DARPA selects Microsoft to continue the development of their Unity scale quantum computing. So all of this comes together. Now we're going to come back to DARPA, but realize how all of this is in the same technocratic Zionist direction. But using your personal information to train these models through the Israeli-controlled entity. It says a group of students from the University of California have now sued DOGE in federal court on Friday for allegedly violating federal privacy rules and exceeding their statutory authority. I don't think it's allegedly at all. I just think I think they have the power right now to stop anything from happening. This is on February 11th, by the way, so it's about a month old. And it says, additionally, congressional Democrats have demanded answers about allegations of a private server used at the Office of Personal Management. Federal workers have sued to stop this, while OPM officials deny it violates the law. Weird way to frame that. Demanded answers about allegations. These aren't allegations, as even their next sentence makes clear. And I already talked about this. Trump and Elon Musk, or rather the Trump administration, right away pushed back on all of that. And part of that was that transition was part of the ethics pledges and all of that. But one of them was using the offices for the transition, for the servers and everything. They said, no, we're going to use our own personal stuff. And it already turned out that they already had one potential hack. There are all sorts of things happening in regard to security. Or really, my point is, I think it's not even the issue. I think they're in a situation now where it's complete unfettered access to whoever they want to have access to because it's in personal servers. How we ever allowed that is beyond me. How anybody, okay, this is my point. Don't you think Democrats, not just a couple of these individuals, but the entire deep state, we're told, would scream about them doing? Well, no, because they don't care. Because they're okay with it because it's in the interest of Israel, which is the real, the picture is your government being played here, not one side fighting the other. The fact that they were able to move information, which we'll get to more in a second in the other article, to a private location. I mean, think about all the screaming about Clinton and Biden and all these documents and now this is okay? Just trillion-dollar databases move because that's convenient? It is insane. That works more than ever there. That people can't see the contradiction in that logic. But it says, and federal judge on Saturday temporarily halted DOGE access to taxpayer information at the Treasury Department because the judge wrote it risks disclosure of sensitive and confidential information and the heightened risk that the systems in question will be more vulnerable than before to hacking, which he was right about because it happened. And on top of that, we can already see that the overlap, the disclosure, they already said, it came out, I think it was Newsweek, the leaked article, the first couple of weeks of this, where they said, somebody said, well, that's going to violate privacy. And they said, well, we're going to start anyway. We'll have to deal with that one. Like an afterthought, sort of like take the guns first, due process later. That's the way they view your rights, guys. All of your government, by the way. Now it says, at the General Services Administration, a former Tesla engineer is pushing an AI-first strategy that involves building a custom chatbot called GSAI to help draft memos faster and adopting an AI coding agent such as the popular assistant Cursor to assist with software developments. You've literally got a person who worked for Elon Musk. Who knows what that really means? If maybe only just that he worked for Elon Musk and has allegiance to him, who is working apparently for an advisor, which, see, the point is it's so obvious to see that this does not make sense. They're lying to everybody and everyone's letting it happen. But the point is that you're now using his background, people he's worked with, his team, to push AI-first strategies using custom-built chatbots for General Services Administration, massive, massive entity. My point is, it's already happening. They're rolling this stuff out or creating coding specific to how do we know what's going into this since people aren't checking? I think it's the Privacy Act. The point is there's supposed to be databases where they're logging every single thing they do. They're not doing that. Even though that got called out by Hannity in regard to what the FBI might be doing behind the scenes around the Epstein conversation. Both should matter. Yes, what the current Trump FBI is doing behind the scenes of the Trump administration should be logged, but also what they're doing everywhere else should be the important conversation. But we don't get to know. Talking about infiltration and backdoor access, my God, ladies and gentlemen, there's a huge issue here. Even if it's not happening, the fact that we don't know whether it is incredible to me. And on the note of the chatbot, we're going to come back to it in a minute about one that they're already rolling out using Grok on Twitter. But it says, Kali Schroeder, senior counsel at the Electronic Privacy Information Center, said there's also the risk that AI gobbles up sensitive data and helps train its models on that data. Yeah, that's already happening. We'll get to that in a minute. Many AI systems use input data to expand their training data sets in addition to using it to generate a prompt response. She says this not only means security risks if the raw training data is exposed, which has already happened, but also puts the data at risk for further misuse. Now, that's with oversight. Now, imagine if there's just literally no oversight. We don't even know there's a problem. Now, as Schroeder noted that these revelations raised fundamental questions about government security protocols if DOGE is indeed using unsecured systems, which I actually find hard to believe, but maybe that's the whole point. The point is we don't know, and the fact that we're not allowed to, I don't know why that doesn't raise red flags. It says any halfway responsible business or organization has many security procedures and policies about what product you can and cannot connect with company devices. They said it appears that our government either does not meet this incredibly basic level of responsibility and good practice, or no one is enforcing existing policies and procedures. The education department claims that there's nothing to worry about with regard to DOGE staff overhauling the department's systems. And they said, quote, they have been sworn in, have the necessary background checks and clearances, and are focused on making the department more cost efficient, accountable, and doing what they said they would do. Okay. Sure. That means nothing to me. So they were sworn in by the other criminals. They were background checked by the other Zionist. The point is, all of that is the government, guys. So you're telling me the government is who I think is all, the only way this would make a difference is if you think it's Democrats versus Republicans. And that's how they play you every time. The reality to me is that your government is overhauling a system with people that are not actually being again, they are on private servers. There's no oversight. There's no ethics pledges or background. I mean, in regard to the administrative people. And on top of that, the people that he's bringing underneath him are not giving all those things. See, this is the problem. The entities that are working under Elon Musk, as far as I can tell, have not gone through any of that. They say that, but that's not done through some government process. That's what Elon Musk claiming they've done their due diligence. Maybe it has. I don't know why we'd blindly believe that unless you are worshiping a hero. Sworn in, necessary background checks, and focused on making it better, so they claim. There is nothing inappropriate or nefarious going on. It's a weird thing to say. Obviously, doth protest too much. But my point, obviously, is whether they even know that. Why do you? Because they're sworn in. They had background checks. It's all good, right? Well, maybe some of them are working for somebody else. Maybe some of them are doing something they shouldn't be doing. I mean, the idea that it's just because they're there, they're the right thing, so nothing wrong is happening is a self-fulfilling prophecy. It says, but a lack of transparency has pervaded the entire Musk takeover without comprehensive congressional oversight. And with DOGE staffers at times refusing to even give their names while interrogating civil servants. They feel they're so far above right now, it's incredible to me. And in many ways they are. Think about giving someone somebody completely wrapped up in the kind of Elon Musk ecosphere, who's 25 years old, who's following all the same sycophants on Twitter, who gets access to stuff like this. And then he's refusing to give his name to somebody who's demanding answers from, who's like a 40-year. And I'm not saying these people even deserve respect. Most of them are criminals, if not all of them. My point is just think about the absurdity that it all makes sense because we all don't like the government. What you're doing is the same thing. You're stepping in with the same lack of accountability, the same lack of honesty, and just cheering it on because the Democrats suck. I mean, I just don't know why people fall for this. And it says, we deserve lawful, transparent, and accountable decisions in government operations. Now here is where this goes for me. Now remember, the Microsoft overlap, which is what they're using, right? That's the point at the beginning of the article. They're using Microsoft Azure for this entire process. Now, don't forget, by the way, back to even BlackRock funding this, you have Elon Musk rolling out his XAI, which is a DARPA program that ended right before he took over Twitter and then ultimately changed the name that they had, which was XAI. Explainable AI, DARPA's program becomes Elon Musk's XAI, totally not the same thing. They literally don't want you to think they're the same thing, even though the months passed. I mean, it was months before he took over Twitter, they ended this program about explainable AI. He buys it, turns it to X, starts XAI, and it's the same thing. You can even look on Twitter where it says, explain this post. It's the same thing. Just like Palantir is the extension of the government operation, it's the same. These are front men, in my opinion. This is the same problem. So AI is rolling out through the people you think are fighting all this stuff. And Trump rolls out his AI-powered mRNA platform, Stargate. I mean, it's all obvious. Now, even if you think these aren't connected, the problem is the question should be asked, if there is infiltration, especially since we don't get to prove that because there's no oversight, there's no information, is it not possible that these things are exactly part of this larger problem? Or maybe they don't even know that, as the infiltration seems to be ubiquitous. Now, Trump has made it clear. President Trump takes action to enhance AI leadership for the United States. This has been a focal point of their entire administration. That is obvious. So here are some overlapping points. Mario Nawfal, of course, you obviously know this is just this guy's swinging right around the whole Elon Musk conversation. It's this ecosphere that's obvious. AI schools are here, he says, and they're changing education. Didn't we just talking about education? Unbound Academy, AI-driven virtual school. Okay, my point is only to make, and then this is my point. Here's Elon Musk. That's already possible. Oh, look, Palmer Luckey. right? Of course it is. Anduril, Oculus, Palantir. Whitney's talked about Palmer Luckey many times. The point, these are going AI education. Elon Musk goes, it's already here. And then what do you know? Because it's totally not an open pipeline. He points out how it's here, AI education. Okay. Maybe you don't think it's a problem. Maybe you're okay with it. Maybe with everything we've discussed so far, realize that this is not just a coincidental series of actions. This is being rolled out. You can see it. My question is, on top of that, well, one, is that okay with you? Isn't that the Great Reset? Isn't that exactly what we all thought we were fighting? And secondarily, is there somebody else pulling the strings here? And then we're rolling out AI influence when through that AI influence, they're dictating your mindset. And then, by the way, just to make sure we're clear on this, here's Elon Musk and them going, AI schools. Oh, well, guess what? Here's a World Economic Forum, 2018. 40 schools in China teaching with AI courses. Oh, so the WEF is on our side now? Unity Party? Is that what we're doing? How long until that happens? No, they're every single thing they're rolling out in this administration is something the World Economic Forum has been proudly putting forward. Here, Ramos 1234 highlights Palantir talking about AI for hospitals. The link is right here for you. He says, gee, nothing like combining a killing machine with an AI-driven care op. Great point. Well, here is World Economic Forum 2024, boosting healthcare capacity with artificial intelligence. These are very public. This has been coming for a long time. My point is, it's funny how people who were fighting this can't see the same thing as Elon rolls the same thing out with the same name. Okay, here's Elon Musk suggesting Grok, his artificial intelligence, having a role in healthcare. Who could have seen that coming? Same point. Not with the larger, this is about specific healthcare like AI medicine. We've talked about that too. That was that was Sustainable Development Goals, World Economic Forum. 4 ways AI is improving healthcare, according to one of the world's largest medical groups, World Economic Forum. Or AI in healthcare, buckle up for change, but read this before the takeoff. That's later, 2024. Okay, here is Newsweek. This is from March 7th. Elon Musk DOGE tried to fire air traffic controllers, report. Now, we've already seen this conversation. Whether it's even the ones they fired for the bird flu point and then fired them all back. The point is they're changing all this stuff that I think in many ways to make it out of control. So the obvious solution to them is the artificial intelligence solution, problem, reaction, solution. But here we are where they're trying to mix this all up. And I've seen many different people around that sphere already float the idea of artificial intelligence for this, to the point to where there's articles being written about why that's not possible. Like, that's how mainstream it's become. It's all right in front of you guys. And so on that note, I'd like to play a great clip that Craig Reese put out, who, by the way, I believe is going to be joining us at the birthday party as well as the carnival. It was great to meet him. I respect his work. Check it out. This is important.
The U.S. has been having a problem lately with airplane and helicopter crashes.
An LAPD helicopter made an emergency landing, 2 officers on board.
Here's what we know. LAPD says one of its air support unit helicopters was doing a training exercise at the Los Alamitos training base when it had a minor training incident around 1 this afternoon. As a result, that pilot had to do an emergency landing.
A plane crash on a South Texas highway injured 4 people.
Yeah, that plane hit several cars when it landed on the access road of a highway in Victoria, southeast of San Antonio.
The plane crash happened in an intersection adjacent to a freeway overpass. Pieces of the aircraft damaged 3 vehicles on the ground. Video initially showed the plane split at the fuselage. Both the Federal Aviation Administration and the National Transportation Safety Board looking into what caused the crash.
Pilot is dead following a plane crash in Adams County. That's according to the Ohio State Highway Patrol, currently out there on the scene. The plane was a private aircraft. It went down in a wooded area near Savage Road in Bratton Township. This all happened around 3:30 p.m. The Federal Aviation Administration and the National Transportation Safety Board plan to investigate the crash.
We now have an FAA report that a military helicopter and a regional jet have collided near Reagan National Airport.
Yeah, you can see the moment of impact down there toward the bottom right-hand side of your screen. That's another plane taking off at the time. But when the camera zooms back out, you're going to see that explosion in just a moment. There it is, right there. So again, and you can see.
Another plane has crashed in another American city, and this time it is Philadelphia. A twin-engine medevac jet took off from a local airport en route to Missouri. That plane reached 1,600 feet after takeoff before plunging 11,000 feet per minute. Here is another look at the crash as it happened.
She's still hanging.
Fighter jet crash in Alaska.
We're learning more about the crash and the pilot who survived. Here's ABC's Lionel Moise.
Video circulating online shows the F-35 crashing at Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska, the pilot ejecting safely.
Yet another community is heartbroken. Residents in Nome saying it's very tight-knit. Everyone is affected by this in some way, and now investigators are focused on figuring out why this happened.
This morning, the U.S. Coast Guard releasing this photo of the mangled wreckage of the plane that vanished over open water in Alaska. 3 bodies of the 10 on board recovered.
This is out of Wilmington, North Carolina, and we are told that Novant Health is now confirming a medical helicopter crash that happened last night with 3 people injured.
Whether or not this is normal, it is being shown to us on the news more than usual, which is creating an emotional reaction. And the false narrative being pushed is that it's due to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion hires. But there is zero evidence of this. It's simply another narrative to keep the sleepy masses busy while the solution of replacing humans with artificial intelligence is being implemented.
We're already working with an AI agent company, so they're building AI agents for this aviation data. So what you saw in America recently with the helicopter crash could have been easily preventable, because ultimately the data was there. We can look back at that crash and we can see those aircraft heading towards each other and crashing. So it wasn't the fact that the data wasn't there, it was just nobody was looking at it at the time, or certainly the people that were looking at it weren't able to do anything about it. So really what we need to be able to do is, why have a human looking at it all the time? Obviously you need a human there to monitor these systems, but if you can use agents to actually detect these issues and then to report them and alert them to the air traffic controllers, then everyone can be alerted to this problem or the situation coming up and actually do something about it.
Greg Reese reporting.
And of course, the same point. As Israel Town is testing air traffic control for drones. World Economic Forum. Interesting intersection. And here's how to use technology to make air travel more efficient or even on the ground. Here's China using AI to tackle air traffic jams. All World Economic Forum. Hard to miss the overlap. Great video as always from Greg Reese. Now here's the interesting points to think about there, right? With what he's highlighting. First, to point out, let's notice that he makes a good point. Whether it's new, which I wouldn't say it's new. It's hard to tell with what they choose to hype in the even corporate media versus the mainstream alternative media, which this new representation of the same problem. Whether they decide to focus on it more all of a sudden. Look at all the mist and the drones, and it's like everyone just highlighting things that were already there in some cases. The point, though, is that are they highlighting that because it's getting worse? And ultimately, and what they highlight first is that they're, at least what they're showing you, began the hype, let's say, existed through Biden into Trump's administration. That's always an important point to show you that it's a nonpartisan, it's a government agenda, right? But the other thing was the two ways you could look at it. Is that, are they crashing because they're testing this? That's a good question. But more so what he's getting at is the rationalization of why it needs to happen. Now, you could even go as far as to argue that these crashes are being made to happen so that happens. I'm not saying that's what I think. Certainly possible. What he's really highlighting, though, is that they're just simply, like, the easiest way to look at it is that they're just choosing to over-focus on these events that have always been there to justify another example of AI control. It's the main point for today. And I don't know why, I don't know why this would be hard to see. Right? I mean, the evidence seems to be pretty clear. Now, this is where it gets even more interesting. Well, the overlapping point with this is just one more example before we get to the article, is that now on Twitter, he's rolling out the AI chat bot on Twitter. So we're beginning, not just that we can use Grok, but literally as a chat bot engaged aspect on the actual discussion. So, I mean, we are being farmed right now. We are being farmed on the platform, but in very broad ways, I guess you could say in unverifiable ways, right? Because I can come on and say, my name's Ryan and I'm 9 feet tall and I've got, purple eyes. The point is the AI would absorb that information and wouldn't really necessarily know whether it's true or false other than comparing it to other things. So there's a reason I make that point. Because what we're going to get into here is about this is a good article from The Conversation. DOGE threat, how government data would give an AI company extraordinary power. Is that the data that they're getting from the government databases, which have regulation, which have verification, is beyond gold. I mean, and this is actually why I included this today. Again, showing you that James Corbett has been so far ahead of information, it's to the point to where people don't even know that he was on the story, because there is very clearly a detriment to being that far ahead on a story. Data is the new oil, 2017. So it's where we are, guys. Your data is the most valuable thing on the planet. I don't even think I would argue that there's some nuance to that, but I don't even think that's that contentious. I mean, you really break down the value that almost becomes immeasurable in some conversations compared to some kind of very valuable resource. Ask people in power what they would rather have. Everything on everybody or more money. And most of them recognize, especially today in the world that we're in, that information, really, you can go back as far as you want to look. Information has always been the most invaluable thing because it's used to control you, manipulate you. But now think about everything we've talked about today and think about the amount of power that either Elon Musk is gaining or Trump through that is gaining. Or rather, I would see it that our government is gaining over you and taking things away from you in the process, or more alarmingly so, what other entities might be pulling the strings on all this. Now, the bigger picture of the title to the conversation, whether it is Israel or China or just the United States, the real question is whether Musk or whoever's pulling his strings and Peter Thiel is when this comes out. And this has been an ongoing conversation. If it does, and if it's ever real, the point is that it's influenceable, especially the early aspects of this where it's about the data that gets put into it. So it matters. If we're talking about, and I think we've already demonstrated today that it's already happening, government through AI, who is pulling those strings? Where's the data source coming from? If we're still screaming about Iran nuclear weapons and yelling about ISIS attack, I mean, guys, we're being lied to in ways that are so embarrassingly clear to show, or lies about basically everything Israel says. If that information is being presented to it, like we've already seen, it comes out in a broken way or a manipulative way. And I think they've been working on controlling a system that is workable while presenting information that's not true. I mean, what else can we talk about? They don't want something that is absolute. That's why the blockchain aspect is only workable for them if it's something they can manipulate. They don't want transparency. Why in the world would you think people who are dishonest about everything they do, who are hiding everything they can, who are removing ethics pledges and hiding and I mean, it's just everything you could possibly highlight. Why would they want you to see everything? The only reason is because you've told yourself that they're the hero. This certainly could be wrong, but everything I just highlighted shows you that they're not doing what you would argue what a honest person would do. So whoever it is, listen to this information and you tell me this is not concerning. This is the DOGE has secured unprecedented access to at least 7 sensitive federal databases, including those of the IRS and the Social Security Administration. This access has sparked fears about cybersecurity vulnerabilities, especially since they're using private servers, and privacy violations. Another concern has received far less attention: the potential use of that data to train private companies' artificial intelligence systems, which I'm of the mind is already happening, and I think we've already seen plenty of evidence to show that. Catherine Austin Fitts has discussed the same point. The White House press secretary said government data that DOGE has collected isn't being used to train Musk's AI models, despite Elon Musk's control over DOGE. However, evidence has emerged that DOGE personnel simultaneously hold positions with at least one of his companies. We already showed you the Tesla guy. Yeah, this is different. This one's about SpaceX. But the point overall is that you could simply argue that he's not training his models, right? Maybe they're working with OpenAI. There's a reason these things are overlapped. I think it's all building in the same direction. I still ask why you think Trump would lean in with Sam Altman when Musk is literally building XAI and calls OpenAI the end of humanity. There's no logic there, other than it's all building in one clear direction, and they're using each as a counterbalance to the other. And so that means that he's going, I'm not going to use it to train my AI models, even though he'd probably do it and wouldn't care anyway. It's as simple as using it on the other version. But many people that he overlaps with, and maybe they are, is the point. At the FFA, excuse me, I did see people call me out. That's just a mistake of the mind. I know it's the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. SpaceX employees at the FAA, SpaceX employees have government email addresses. This dual employment creates a conduit for federal data to potentially be siphoned to Musk's owned enterprises, Musk-owned enterprises, including XAI. Now, that's just a hypothetical, right? But realize, again, I think we're all very aware of the kind of people that circle these, and it's not unique to right. The kind of ideological driven people that circle the Bidens and the Clintons, and the same kind of ideological people that circle the Trumps and the Elon Musk circle. We all know that, if we're honest with ourselves. So these are people who are acting through the unprecedented amount of power they're being given, or at least in some cases. My point is, do you not think these people would decide to give information to Musk because he's saving the country, right? Or he's going to fight for free speech. So we'll give him the information about these bad Democrats. Yeah, in what world is that not very likely? I'm not saying we can prove it's happening. And it was just as likely with the Clintons and so on. The point is the same. That's a problem. And they would rationalize it to anything they want because they've made the argument that they're saving the world. Isn't it? Guys, here's what's funny about this. They're using, this just came to me. They're using the argument that we're saving the world from Democrats or communism or whatever else. And what's the solution? You're reimagining technocratic future, but they're not calling it that. What do the Democrats do? Well, we're saving the world from climate change. And what's our solution? Your technocratic future. And they did call it that, just a little different. Isn't that funny? How it's the same solution for the same kind of problem with a little different flavor, and everybody ignores the problem. It's, again, actually, I got to stop doing that so broadly. And you guys know I say it often, but some people miss it. I don't think it's the majority. When I speak about that, I'm talking about the partisanship. I think a lot of people are very uncomfortable with this, and I think more than we've ever seen. I think that's why it's being rushed. But think about that. Both sides of the paradigm driving in the same solution for a different version of the same problem. It says, and then it goes on to say, the company's latest Grok AI chatbot model conspicuously refuses to give a clear denial about using such data. That is interesting. I haven't got to test that yet, but make sure you do. Let me know what you see about whether Grok is being used. And by the way, I've seen people posting things I can't verify, so I don't want to share it, but arguing that Grok is, ask it whether it's being trained on government data. But it says, as a political scientist and technologist who is intimately acquainted with public sources of government data, the author writes, I believe this potential transmission of government data to private companies presents far greater privacy and power implications than most reporting identifies. A private entity with the capacity to develop artificial intelligence technologies could use government data to leapfrog its competitors and wield massive influence over society. Now, see, here's the problem. This is why this is not even debatable. Realize that Donald Trump rolled out through a government executive order that this was the direct, we are going to spearhead the AI discussion for the world. Okay. Well, there's two very clear leading examples, XAI and OpenAI. Now, you see why he went with Sam Altman, so it wasn't so shockingly clear that it's just through Elon Musk. That's why, guys. It's one of the reasons that I very clearly saw. Because I think they're all interconnected, but the point is, if you go with Elon Musk, there'd be a whole other argument about why he's rolling out, through an advisor, through his program. There'd be an issue, right? It's as easy as just sidestepping that by one person. But you have to realize, as basically went back as political scientist and technologist who is intimately acquainted with public, I believe, where was it? A private equity's capacity to develop so leapfrogs competitors is the point I was trying to remember. Is the idea that ultimately you can see that you're talking about leapfrogging, but I guess an AI, OpenAI or whatever else is on the field, or China, for example. My point is that's what Trump has said his interests are. We need to beat China. That's even what they use the state of emergency they claim was going to be for the border. They lied. It may eventually be, but they first used it to roll this out in an unprecedented fashion. It's about the program they're rolling out for the direction. And the obvious point is that they will leapfrog the rest of the world if they're able to use all of this data to get there. But who's to say that China's not already doing that, right? But that's the game. We got to do the same thing or we're going to lose. Well, the same thing is violating your privacy rights, ignoring your free speech. That's where we are. Then it says, for AI developers, government databases represent something akin to finding the Holy Grail. While companies such as OpenAI, Google, and XAI currently rely on information scraped from public internet, which is crazy in of its own right. Like they're telling you they're using Twitter to scrape what you're claiming to train its models. That's why you're the product right now. Non-public government repositories, like they're currently accessing, offer something much more valuable. Verified records of actual human behavior across entire populations. This is like the fine-tuning that this needs to work. That's what it sounds like to me. This isn't merely more data. It's fundamentally different data. Social media posts and web browsing histories show curated or intended behaviors, but government databases capture real decisions, sort of like what you actually did when you lied about something online, right? These are really important distinctions and learning aspects for how this is being trained. And I'm not saying that in a good way. And it says, and captures the real decisions and their consequences. For example, Medicare records reveal healthcare choices and outcomes, right? Not just what you decided, but what the outcome. IRS and Treasury data reveal financial decisions and then the long-term impacts. And federal employment and education statistics reveal education paths and career trajectories. What makes this data particularly valuable for AI training is its longitudinal nature and reliability. Unlike the disordered information available online, government records follow standardized protocols, undergo regular audits, and must meet legal requirements for accuracy. Now, that's not to say that they're always accurate. The point, though, is that you can very clearly rely more on the, again, I could say something online that would mean one thing. This is whether I meant say something or not, you could prove the long-term outcome, and not even just about one person, but a society, a community, a certain ideological conversation. And this is that goes on to say, unlike the disordered available information online, government records follow standardized protocols, regular audits, accuracy. Every Social Security payment, Medicare claim, and federal grant creates a verified data point about real-world behavior. This data exists nowhere else with such breadth and authenticity in the United States. So this is the holy grail of information, guys. Like, just realize that. You have to recognize to them, as they know, this represents the best possible database they could find. Most critically, government databases track entire populations over time, not just digitally active users. I'll also add, to a foreign government that's trying to infiltrate all of this, this is mouthwatering. Now, it says most critically, government databases track entire populations over time, not just digital active users. They include people who never use social media. That's really important for what they're trying to accomplish to control your lives. Don't shop online or actively avoid digital services in general. For an AI company, this would mean training systems on the actual diversity of human experience, rather than just the digital reflections people cast online, which that's one of the things Grok was having a problem with. Then it goes on to say, control of critical systems. This is what really worries me. Like a company like XAI could do far more with models trained on government data than building better chatbots on content generators. Such systems could fundamentally transform and potentially control how people understand and manage complex societal systems. While some of these capabilities could be beneficial under the control of accountable public agencies, I believe the author writes, they pose a threat in the hands of a single private company. I argue it's a threat for both, but far more obviously and less accountable for somebody acting through, a private company that you can't FOIA, even though that doesn't always give you the information. But overall, you can see that this is not just transform and potentially control systems, but your worldview, right? Like control the way that this is clearly being used to like socially engineer through these systems, but the AI being sort of the guiding force. But that's what's all being fleshed out right now, I believe. Now it says under infrastructure and urban systems, government databases contain information about critical infrastructure usage patterns, maintenance histories, emergency response times, and development impacts. Think carbine, right? Dams, water infrastructure. What Whitney's telling you, the Israeli government have infiltrated. Now, this is the final point, I argue. If that's what's happening, and I believe that it is, we're talking about government databases with critical information, right? That rug can be pulled should there be a problem, or you want to execute some kind of an agenda. And this is what our government's done all over the world. So this should not be hard for you to understand. USAID and National Endowment for Democracy and Israel and the U.S. government just blatantly have carried out exactly these kind of actions. Cyber attacks on Iran, destabilization actions, to Syria and Lebanon, all over the place. The point is, I think it's already been done to us, but it's being built out right now in ways that we will not be able to come back from. And the people that I think you're screaming about saving us from the deep state are the ones cementing this in place. I hope I'm wrong. Every federal grant, infrastructure, inspection, and emergency response creates a data point that could help train AI better to understand how cities and regions function. And through that, better control them. A private company with exclusive access would gain unique insight into the physical and economic arteries of American society. This could allow the company to develop smart city systems that city governments would become dependent on, efficiently prioritizing aspects of urban governance. Now, there's 2 points there. Smart cities are not supposed to be what are coming through the Trump administration, even though we know that's part of the same discussion. They're rolling out the Great Reset, guys. You can look at all the different points. They're just calling it different things. Or call them freedom cities if you want. It's the same conversation. But the second part is using that system that these government cities, the state level, will gobble up because they want more power, that will ultimately make them dependent on the system for that power. But it could go a lot of different ways. This is just the author theorizing about this, but it makes a lot of sense. Privatizing aspects of urban governance. It says, when combined with real-time data from private sources, the predictive capabilities, this is what's crazy, predictive capabilities would far exceed what any current system can achieve. Now, that is what really comes to mind for me. Whether Whitney's talking about pre-crime or medical pre-crime, this amount of data consolidation with what they've already been doing, we're talking about predictive models that go so far beyond what right now, how long have I been saying that? The amount of kind of digital twin research where they can predict what you'll do. I can't even imagine what this will go to, if not already there. Where they'll, with your information of what you posted on your 75 different social media platforms for the last 25 years, what they can predict and to what certainty. A company such as XAI with Musk's resources and preferential access through DOGE could surmount technical and political obstacles far more easier than competitors. Now, you could mean that in his companies, or you could mean that in government. Recent advances in machine learning have also reduced the burdens of preparing data for the algorithms to process, making government data a veritable goldmine, one that rightfully belongs to the American people. It's all your data, guys, and they're just talk about, this is the modern gold rush, and it has been for a while, and you're not seeing anything. They're taking all your data, training everything for themselves, marketing, selling it. It's like everything else. It's like they've been doing with our data since this started. It's just far more concerning right now. The threat of a private company accessing government data transcends individual privacy concerns. It really does. While still part of it, there's a whole other level to this. It says, since information is power, concentrating unprecedented data in the hands of a private entity with an explicit political agenda, which is obvious, he's not hiding his political agenda, represents a profound challenge to the republic, to the democracy, whatever you want to call it, to the country of the United States. Which, we're supposed to be a republic, but that's not where we are today. Data is the new oil. Now, this is, by the way, why we talked about this great article from Strategic Culture Foundation. I called it the deep DOGE state. Now, what they really argue in this is that this is ultimately represents the deep state. Now, whether or not that's what I guess we could put it as whether they have bad intentions, let's say. Because you could argue as the Andreessen, Karp, Machiavellian mindset, where they're the good elitists saving you from the bad elitists. They say elites, but they're elitists. The truth is, guys, that this is it's still a consolidation of power, which is anybody who cares about these things and not just the talking points should care about. I thought it was in here somewhere. It's in this article. It was Strategic Culture Foundation. Let me see if I can get it to pop up here. There it is. I think that's it. It's a good article. I mean, I go over pretty extensively in this show, but always, one, read the article for yourself, but make sure you support the platform. It's called DOGE, aka the Deep State Made Official. And the argument is that consider for yourself whether they're just simply stepping back out of the shadows, that they're just like writing into law that they are, the deep state exists. I mean, it's while claiming they're fighting it. That's the point they make about when they're just firing people and they're like, yay, get rid of the deep state. It's like, did you vet it? Do you know those people? Do you know whether that's what they were doing? Maybe they're firing people that were fighting the deep state for all you know. I mean, you don't know these things. You're trusting narratives. Include that for you. But here's the point I mentioned earlier. Here's the Washington Post. It's not about the platform. It says, no, artificial intelligence can't decide whom to fire or many other DOGE goals. It says, identify mission critical jobs, spot dead people on social security rolls. Government needs AI, but what DOGE appears to be doing doesn't add up. And there is your classic false binary, right? So is the question whether we need the right kind of AI? That's the same thing Trump, or rather Musk and Altman were doing. Or is the question whether we should allow this at all? The government does not, unless your argument is we have to fight China. I mean, you're literally putting out imperialist arguments. We can't let China overtake. What are we talking about? Are you of the mind that China will use that to overtake our country? It's certainly possible. But the idea is, if we're going to have that conversation, it can't be this rush to the end with no concern for privacy outcomes. Our government is not made for that right now. Our government is our enemy. That's very clear to me. And no, I'm not calling for violence. The reality is that we need to ask ourselves how we change this. Get to a place to where we can have a valid discussion about how we would decide as an entity to roll these things out in ways that would, which I'm of the mind that's no. My argument will always be no. But that's not to say that I'm unaware of the argument for why logically we might need to for a threat. I'll always be of the mind that's not the way to go. My point, though, is that if we're going to pretend that that threat justifies actions that go against everything we believe in, then we don't believe in anything. This is Washington Post telling you that we need what they're rolling out. We just don't need it their way. Stand back and ask whether we need it at all. Now, a federal judge has denied a request to block DOGE from accessing Treasury data. It started out where they essentially did, and then ultimately the judge stepped in and denied the request to block them. So they have access to this data. That was as of today. I just think this is insane. Lastly, to go back to the point that we're making, funny how on March 6th, The Guardian writes this article. Revealed, Israeli military creating a ChatGPT-like tool using vast collection of Palestinian surveillance data. It's almost too perfect of a point. Like, this sums up everything we're talking about in one discussion. Not that The Guardian, it's not even about the platform. It's about the reality that the Israeli government is choosing to emulate what your government's doing to you in exactly the same way against the Palestinians, but very publicly. We're just using your AI chat game to surveil Palestinians. Guys, if you don't see how obvious that is, that this is exactly what they're doing to you and Israel, the same, there's a reason this is overlapped. I don't know what else I can do for you. All of it's there for you. All the information, look into it. At the very least, ask yourself if it's possible. If Israel's literally using these tools for that purpose on Palestinians, and these tools are right now on your phones, ask yourself whether that could be happening. Maybe it's even Israel too. That would make more sense than anything. At least ask the question. Especially while Palantir, who is embedded like a tick in this administration, is literally building AI systems for this country as well as helping the genocide in Israel. January 12th, 2024. While the genocide's ongoing, there's Karp, there's Teal. Literally a part of it. Or both sides of the, whether Kamala, Biden, or Trump, or whoever, the point was it was always going to be a Zionist technocrat. That's how this has worked out. And in a general sense, AI governance, that's World Economic Forum. This is called the AI Governance Alliance, and you'll find that they're all involved. And you'll also find that most everybody in this administration is tapped into somewhere with them and the young global leaders or whatever else, but it's all a big coincidence as long as it's your side. And just to end in general, we will be talking more about Palestine and Gaza in general, but look, Vanessa and I already talked about this. This was December 18th, 2024. The Gaza Technocracy Incubator. There's a reason that they're testing these things there. There's a reason that they're just talking about getting rid of them to build the Technate there. There's something happening. Israel's a central play in all this, and how can you miss that Trump's administration is bowing to them? Just like the other side of the conversation, but right now in a way I've never seen. And they're openly telling you that they're going to build something new. It's important to realize that this is all coming together, and it's just willful disregard as they build it around you. And at the same time, which we'll talk about more, actually, I'm going to keep this open so I remember to reference that again. This is from March 4th. Egypt's Gaza plan, excludes Hamas from future governance. Now, I already talked about this, and the point is that that's not enough for Israel. It should be in the context of what they claim they want, but really what they want is the killing of all Palestinians. So Hamas has said this already. Fine, we won't be in the government, but they said, no, we want them gone, which technically is not their right. None of this is that. Nothing they do is legal. My point is not about, which we'll talk about more in the next show, about the future of what's going to happen there. But this to me it's also tied to today's conversation. Who apparently Palestinians no longer, if ever, get to decide their own future of governance. But realize this is not even on the table since they're going to kick them all out, and Trump said they're not allowed to return. What I'm trying to highlight is another experiment wherever they go of AI management, which is being discussed. And the people involved are already doing that. If you haven't been seeing that they've been the overlapping of Gaza is one of the most surveilled places in the world. That's using artificial intelligence, Palantir, and the rest. We already know this. So we are being trained. This is a model that is going to be rolled out that I see happening in real time. Here's Prospera in Honduras, if you need to remember that, how obvious this is. There's been pilots of this all over the place. This is coming. Now, I'll end with the interesting idea of trusting the plan. You know, it's interesting to see a lot of people who want to believe that we just need to give them a shot, right? We just need to let them see how this plays out. Well, you know what? That's never the right answer. You may be right. Maybe it'll turn out that they're fighting for us. I hope more than anything in the world that you're right. The problem is you could be wrong. We don't know, right? And if you're honest, you'll admit that. You hope you could be wrong. So is it not the smartest thing to do to just wait for outcome? To be critical of things that give you suspicion and then praise it when it happens if the good thing comes. You see, that's just objectivity. That's honesty. The problem is far too many people have been propped up who want you to trust the plan. That seems to be everyone in this administration, quite frankly. But again, it's the government. It's the same old tactics. Here is Dan Bongino. And really what I'm actually highlighting here is what MAGA Voice said about what Dan said. What Dan said is basically, don't worry, I'll be there on the 17th. Kash Patel and Bondi got it covered. Which you could argue doesn't mean that they just trust everything they say, but you know that's what he's putting forward. And you can listen to the larger conversation. That's essentially what he's saying. My point is MAGA Voice highlights that and says, Dan Bongino reminds everybody that Kash Patel and Pam Bondi have got things covered. He will be at the FBI March 17th. Let's freaking go. It's so funny. The point is, I said, so essentially trust the plan, right? They've got it. Stop criticizing them. They'll get it done. We'll get the Epstein files out. Just let it. So sit back and trust the plan. It's what they've always been telling you, even though it's been year after year after year after what they promised. Well, and this isn't just Q. It's just the obvious point in all of this. It's clearly being shown to be a intelligence operation that's been ongoing for probably Israel, for all I know, or some central people being led by that who are influencing people that are being led by the nose. And I think it's far less of the conservative movement than you think. It's specifically team sport politics. I just don't know why people can't see this in that inner circle. If they're like, other than just the dishonest people that don't care, I know some of them that just can't seem to wrap their mind around it. I know they're not dishonest. I don't understand what the block is. I think that's where we get into the whole psychological play, whether it's like a cult aspect, I don't know. But what I do know is that more people I talk to every day seeing through this. That's not to say the same as saying, no, I don't support Trump, for example, but clearly see the problem, whether Israel influence on the government, whether the AI direction or mRNA or vaccinating, and you name it. It's an endless list right now. So you know people see it. As always, what I want is people that are willing to question these things. Don't take my word for it. Don't blindly assume they're all the problem. Look into it. Just show skepticism. It's okay to stand back and say, well, we don't know right now. Let's wait for the outcome. That's all I want. Because right now we need that more than ever. I'm going to leave you with a clip from Carrie Wedler. Outstanding work as always. Watch the whole thing. I mean, most of you probably already know where this is going to go, right when it starts, but just it's important because she makes excellent points, especially if you're of the mind that, ultimately we should let them see. Like, my point is not to not let them see. Like, the point is we have to let it play out. We don't have a choice, essentially. But don't, I guess, shout down people or argue that we shouldn't be questioning it. We all should be questioning it. We should say that this doesn't feel right. But I still have hope they're going to do the right thing. That's all. I think that would be an acceptable answer, but you can do what you want. You have to do what I think is acceptable. But the overarching point is about integrity, honesty, principles. And so by choosing to ignore things that you would call out in other people's situations, you know you're doing something wrong. You know that you're doing it. You're pulling a punch because you want to believe it. And I said in the other interview, I know, I get it. I want to believe this is going to be a positive thing. Don't we all? But it's just the only thing we can do today is question everything. More importantly, the people that we believe in. So this clip, I think, breaks it down about why trusting the plan has always been a manipulation. And hopefully it will drive you to see a bigger picture beyond partisanship, which is where we all need to get to. Thank you for tuning in today. Really appreciate all your support, guys. Couldn't do this without you. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Else feel like they're watching their fellow humans fall into a trance and throw themselves off a cliff as they fall under a new propaganda spell convincing them the oligarchs have come to the rescue, the government is now the good guy, and America's
Golden Age
has arrived? The trance goes like this. Tulsi is the director of national intelligence, RFK Jr. is going to make us healthy, and Elon and the DOGE are exposing corruption and waste. Cash is now the top cop. There's a task force to release classified documents, and Trump froze foreign aid. America's back. And the new ruling class is here to liberate and protect us while taking out the deep state. Finally, we're saved. It's tempting and it sounds miraculous. Until you look past the shadows on the wall to the character and behaviors of those casting them. While it's great and not hard at all or revelatory to expose government waste and corruption, how is Elon going to handle his own surveillance state and military-industrial contracts? Will SpaceX face scrutiny for buying bipartisan influence in the broken system he and the oligarchy now rail against? How is DOGE any match for the current House Republican budget proposal, which is slated to increase the deficit by hundreds of billions each year? The Senate overwhelmingly voted against an amendment to make significant spending cuts to their version of the astronomical budget. Is a public-private partnership with some of the most powerful tech people who are pushing biometric digital IDs and envisioning total surveillance taking down the deep state? Is advancing artificial intelligence in government, especially in the military and the CIA, to the benefit of Silicon Valley tycoons what MAGA voted for? Are mRNA AI cancer shots and poultry injections Maha? Is the new seed oil shilling deputy director of the USDA? Fun fact, RFK Jr. does not oversee the USDA. Meanwhile, Patel vows to punish journalists when the government decides they've done bad things. And about those classified documents, the most transparent administration in history promised you. Trump, quote, banned CBDCs only to promote them with an extra step. It's cool Trump said he wants to cut defense spending. He also recently said,
We want to raise defense spending. I think we have to have it.
The new Senate Republican budget proposal allows for $150 billion more for the military in the next 9 years. Meanwhile, Trump is funneling literal tons of weapons to Israel. He claims the US will annex Gaza and his entire cabinet is packed with Israel bootlicking shills while he orders a multi-billion-dollar Iron Dome built over America. By the way, Biden launching airstrikes against terrorists is unconstitutional, but Trump doing it is extraordinary leadership. A government agency is looking to monitor speech for criticism of said government agency. Trump is attempting to silence speech for his handlers and just shut down a police accountability database. He's also expanding Guantanamo, a black stain on American values. His King neocon-endorsed CIA director won't reject the use of torture, but Trump's Wall Street Secretary of Commerce did say his goal is to abolish the IRS, and paying higher prices caused by government intervention is now patriotic. So bend the knee. I get that people want to feel optimistic. The ruling class has beaten them down, made them feel othered, dehumanized, and disempowered. People of all partisan persuasions have been conditioned to believe they can't save themselves, that they need politicians and oligarchs to liberate them. And because of
We, the people, are the government.
indoctrination pushed in civics, they believe these politicians and oligarchs and the authoritarian state they rule over are actually extensions of themselves. This is a recipe for the most extreme dystopia yet. The propaganda is top tier, and the masses are now being showered with signs of hope and change, just enough that many of them will look the other way at the rapid progression of the technocratic police state and the further consolidation of power in the hands of a few. These types call anyone who questions their new narratives black-pilled. But black-pilled means cynical and negative, and many of us questioning the new regime are anything but. We simply don't believe real solutions come from government and the documented liars and megalomaniacs in control of it, or that a few crumbs of winning will counteract the grave threats to liberty imposed by those at the top, as they always have been. And don't even think about calling me a libtard. I'm more anti-government than any MAGA bot. And my skepticism doesn't change based on who's in power. If you're watching this rapid descent into cultism and feeling disturbed and disheartened, please know you're not alone. Many of us out here aren't falling for the new regime's propaganda and will continue to question and resist government authority regardless of who's in control of it. Those of us who understand that government and the people who seek control of it aren't coming to save us will keep pushing back against the smoke and mirrors. MAGA may be celebrating their new masters in chains, but some of us don't want masters in chains for ourselves or anyone else.